I retired to the woods to find peace, not roommates. My son-in-law Gavin called me on my first morning of freedom and said my parents are moving in with you tomorrow, so clear out the master bedroom. When I refused, he laughed and said, if you do not like it, you can move back to the city, old man. He thought he was evicting a helpless retiree. He did not know he was waking up a sleeping giant. I did not say a word. I just prepared a welcome gift that would make them wish they had never learned my address. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to defend your home from unwanted guests. My name is Thaddeus Freeman, and I am 71 years old. The coffee in my mug was still steaming hot when the silence of my lakeside sanctuary was shattered. I was sitting on the deck overlooking the water, admiring the mist rising off the lake. It was the first morning of my retirement. I had spent 5 years building this house with my own hands. Every beam of oak, every stone in the fireplace was placed by me. I built it for my late wife Rose, but she passed before we could move in. Now it was just me and the silence. I loved the silence. Then my phone rang. The screen flashed the name Gavin, my son-in-law. My stomach tightened. Gavin was a 35-year-old real estate agent who had never sold a house in his life but drove a leased BMW he could not afford. I swiped to answer, expecting him to ask for money again. I did not even get a hello. "Pop, we have a situation," Gavin said, his voice loud and fast. "My parents are moving in with you. They will be there tomorrow morning. You need to clear your stuff out of the master bedroom because Mom has bad knees and she cannot climb the stairs." I took a slow sip of my coffee. The audacity was breathtaking. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I think you have the wrong number, Gavin. This is my house. I am not running a hotel." "Look, Thaddeus, do not be difficult," Gavin snapped. His tone shifted from demand to threat in a heartbeat. "Stan and Brenda lost their rental. They have nowhere else to go. You have 5 bedrooms in that cabin, and you are just one old man. You do not need all that space. It is selfish." "I am not being selfish," I said, my hand gripping the phone tighter. "I am being clear." "No." There was a pause on the other end, a heavy breathing silence. Then Gavin played his ace. "You know Keisha is really stressed right now. She is crying her eyes out. If you do not help us out, if you turn your back on family, I do not think we can come visit next month. In fact, I do not think you will be seeing little Leo for a very long time. My grandson." He was using my 4-year-old grandson as a bargaining chip. The rage flared in my chest, hot and sharp, but I pushed it down. "I learned a long time ago that you do not win a war by yelling, you win by waiting." "Put Keisha on the phone," I said. "She is too upset to talk to you," Gavin said. "Put my daughter on the phone, Gavin, or I hang up and change the locks right now." A shuffling sound. Then I heard Keisha's voice. It was small and trembling. "Daddy, please," she sobbed. "They were evicted this morning. They have everything in a truck, just for a few days, just until Gavin closes his big deal next week. Please, Daddy, if you do not help them, they are going to move into our apartment and we do not have room. Gavin is going crazy." I closed my eyes. My daughter was a good woman, but she had a spine made of glass. She had married a man who treated her like an accessory and treated me like a wallet. 2 days, Keisha," I said firmly. 2 days. That is it. Thank you, Daddy. Thank you," she cried. I hung up the phone and looked out at the lake. The peace was gone. I knew Gavin was lying about the big deal. There was no big deal. There never was. They thought I was just a retired engineer. A lonely old black man in the woods who needed company. They forgot who I was before I retired. I did not just draw blueprints. I owned Freeman Construction, the largest contracting firm in the state, for 30 years. I dealt with corrupt unions, shady suppliers, and clients who tried to stiff me on million-dollar payments. I knew how to handle bullies. I knew how to handle structural failures. And my family was suffering from a severe structural failure. I spent the rest of the day securing my personal items. I locked my office. I moved my most valuable tools to the hidden basement. I prepared myself mentally for a weekend of inconvenience. But I was wrong. It was not going to be a weekend, and they were not coming tomorrow morning. It was 11 at night when I saw the lights. I was reading in the living room when high beams cut through the darkness like searchlights. The roar of a diesel engine shook the window panes. This was not a car. It was a moving truck. They were early. I walked to the front door and opened it. The cool night air rushed in, carrying the smell of exhaust fumes. A massive 18-wheeler was backing over my manicured lawn. The tires tore deep ruts into the grass I had planted seed by seed. A sedan pulled up behind the truck. The door opened, and Stan stepped out. Stan was a large man with a red face and a belly that strained against his polo shirt. He looked around my property with a sneer. He did not look like a man who had just been evicted and needed charity. He looked like a man surveying a property he intended to conquer. He did not see me standing on the porch in the shadows. He walked straight over to the prize rose bushes near the driveway. These were the roses Rose had grafted herself before she died. I had transplanted them here with the care of a surgeon. Stan unzipped his pants and urinated right on the white petals. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice booming across the yard. Stan jumped, but he did not stop. He finished zipped up and turned to look at me. He laughed a wet, throaty sound. "When you gotta go, Thaddeus," he yelled. "Nice place you got here. Little far from civilization, though, isn't it?" He walked up the steps, pushing past me as if I were the doorman. Brenda climbed out of the car next. She was holding a small dog that looked more like a rat. She dropped a cigarette butt on my porch steps and crushed it with her heel. "Where is the master bedroom?" she asked without saying hello. "My back is killing me from that car ride. I hope you put fresh sheets on the bed." Gavin got out of the driver's seat of the sedan. He walked up the steps smirking. "Surprise, Pop," he said. "We thought we would beat the traffic." I stood in the doorway blocking the entrance. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my face remained stone. "You said tomorrow morning," I said. "And you said 2 days. Plans change," Gavin said, pushing past me. "Stan and Brenda are already inside." "What are you going to do? Kick them out in the cold? Don't be a monster, Thaddeus." I turned around. Stan was already in the living room. He had flopped onto my Italian leather armchair with his dirty shoes still on. He picked up the remote and started flipping channels. "This TV is too small," he shouted. "We need to bring in my 70-inch from the truck. Hey, Gavin, tell the movers to bring the big TV in first." I looked at Gavin. I looked at Stan destroying my peace. I looked at the ruts in my lawn and the cigarette butt on my porch. I realized then that this was not a visit. This was an invasion. They were not here to stay for 2 days. They were here to take over. I looked at Gavin, and for the first time he saw something in my eyes that made his smirk falter. "You are right, Gavin," I said quietly. "Plans do change." I stepped back and let them in. I did not fight. I did not yell. I let them bring in their boxes. I let them take over the living room. Because I knew something they did not. This house was not just a house, it was a machine. I had designed every inch of it. I controlled the water, I controlled the electricity, I controlled the locks. They thought they were moving into a luxury cottage. They did not know they were moving into a trap, and I was the one holding the remote control. Stan yelled from the living room asking for a beer. I walked to the kitchen. I did not get him a beer. I picked up my phone and sent a single text message to my lawyer Rothstein. "It has started." Then I poured myself a glass of water and smiled. The invasion had begun, but the war was just getting started. Brenda walked through my front door like she was the Queen of England inspecting a peasant hovel. She was wearing a coat made of synthetic leopard fur that looked like it had lost a fight with a lawnmower. She wrinkled her nose as soon as she crossed the threshold. "It smells like a barn in here," she announced loudly. Her voice was shrill and scraped against my nerves like sandpaper. "It is white oak, Brenda," I said, closing the door behind her to keep the bugs out. "It is the smell of the wood. It is natural." "Well, it stinks," she said, waving a hand in front of her face. "It smells like sawdust and dirt. You need to get some air fresheners in here, Thaddeus. Maybe some vanilla or lavender to cover up this old house smell." She walked past me, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood floors I had sanded and stained myself. She looked around the living room with a critical eye, ignoring the panoramic view of the lake that usually took people's breath away. "It is hot in here," she complained, pulling at the collar of her cheap blouse. "Turn on the air conditioning. It is stifling." "The windows are open, Brenda," I said, pointing to the floor-to-ceiling glass panels that let in the cool evening breeze coming off the water. "We do not need air conditioning. The cross-ventilation keeps the house perfectly cool." "I do not care about ventilation," she snapped. "I care about being comfortable. Close those windows and crank up the AC. I am sweating like a pig." Before I could answer, she marched over to my favorite chair. It was a hand-stitched Italian leather armchair that I had imported from Milan. It was the one piece of furniture I treated myself to after 40 years of hard labor. It was sleek, modern, and worth more than the car she had arrived in. Brenda took off her sweaty fake fur coat and threw it carelessly onto the pristine leather. The metal zipper scratched against the surface, and I felt a phantom pain in my own skin. "Don't put that there," I started to say, stepping forward. "Relax, Thaddeus. It is just a chair." She interrupted me, already turning her back to look for the thermostat. "You are so uptight. No wonder your blood pressure is probably through the roof." She found the control panel on the wall and started mashing buttons with her acrylic nails. I watched her treating my sophisticated climate control system like it was a broken vending machine. She did not know that I had locked the temperature controls from my phone 5 minutes ago. She could press those buttons until her fingers fell off, but the temperature would not change by a single degree. "Where is the master bedroom?" she demanded, giving up on the thermostat. "I need to lie down. My sciatica is acting up from sitting in that car." Gavin stepped forward then. He had been watching the exchange with a smirk, leaning against the doorframe of the kitchen. "Yeah, about that," Pop, Gavin said. "We need to switch rooms." I looked at him. The audacity was growing by the second like a tumor. "Switch rooms?" I repeated, my voice low and dangerous. "Mom and Dad need the master suite," Gavin said, stepping into the living room. "It is on the ground floor. It has the ensuite bathroom with the soaking tub. Mom needs that for her back. You can take the guest room down the hall. Or better yet, there is that finished room off the garage. It is quiet." "You like quiet, right?" I felt the heat rise up my neck. The master suite was not just a room. It was the sanctuary I had built for Rose. I had designed the closet specifically for her dresses. I had installed the heated floors because her feet were always cold. I had never even slept in that bed because she died before we moved in. It was a shrine. And now they wanted to put Stan and Brenda in it. "Absolutely not," I said. "That is my room. The guest rooms are perfectly comfortable. They have their own bathrooms." "Don't be difficult," Thaddeus, Gavin said, his voice taking on that bullying edge again. "Look at my mother. She is in pain. Are you really going to make an old woman suffer because you want to hoard the biggest room for yourself? You are one man. They are two people. It is just logic." "It is my house," I said. "That is the only logic that matters." Gavin turned to Keisha, who was standing by the kitchen island holding my grandson Leo. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were red and puffy. She was trying to make herself as small as possible. "Keisha, tell him," Gavin barked. "Tell your father how much stress this is causing you. Tell him how you can't stop crying because he is being so stubborn." Keisha looked up at me. Her lower lip trembled. I saw the fear in her eyes. It wasn't fear of me, it was fear of him. She was terrified of what he would do or say if she didn't back him up. She was trapped between a husband who bullied her and a father she didn't want to disappoint. "Daddy, please," she whispered. "Just let them have the room. It is just for a little while. Please, I can't take any more fighting. If you don't do this, Gavin is going to make us leave, and I don't know where we will go." I looked at my daughter. I saw the exhaustion in her posture. I saw the way she clutched her son like a shield. If I kicked them out now, Gavin would take it out on her. He would make her life miserable. I knew men like Gavin. They only felt big when they made someone else feel small. I took a deep breath. I looked at the master bedroom door. I said a silent apology to Rose. "Fine," I said. My voice was flat. "They can have the master." "Yes," Gavin hissed, pumping his fist like he had scored a touchdown. "See, Pop, that wasn't so hard, was it? Teamwork makes the dream work." He didn't wait for me to change my mind. He started grabbing boxes and hauling them toward my sanctuary. Brenda followed him, smirking at me as she passed. "Make sure you wash the sheets, Thaddeus," she called out. "I have sensitive skin." I did not reply. I walked past them and went to the room off the garage. It was not a guest room. It was a converted storage space that I used as a staging area for my projects. It had a concrete floor and a small window that looked out at the driveway. It was cold and Spartan. But it had one advantage they did not know about. This room shared a wall with the utility closet where the main server for the house was located. From here, I could access the brain of the entire property. I threw my bag onto the cot in the corner. I sat down and listened to the sounds of them moving into my house. The thud of heavy boots, the screech of furniture being dragged across my hardwood floors, the loud braying laughter of Stan. I was not sleeping in the master suite. I was sleeping in the command center. And the war had just moved to a new front. I barely slept that night. The sounds of their celebration echoed through the house until 3 in the morning. Stan's snoring vibrated the walls like a jackhammer. But I was up before the sun. I have been an early riser my whole life. The job site does not wait for anyone. I made a pot of coffee in the small kitchenette in my room and walked out to the front porch to watch the sunrise. I needed a moment of peace to clear my head and formulate a plan, but my peace was short-lived. A white van was parked in my driveway, blocking my truck. The side of the van read Smithson Lock and Key. I frowned. I walked around the side of the house to the front door. There was a man kneeling in front of my custom mahogany door. He had a drill in his hand. He was boring a hole right through the wood next to the smart lock I had installed. "Hey!" I shouted, running toward him. "What do you think you are doing?" The locksmith jumped and pulled the drill back. He looked up at me confused. "Just doing what the lady asked, buddy," he said. "Changing the locks." I looked up. Brenda was standing in the doorway holding a mug of my coffee. She was wearing a silk robe that I recognized. It was Rose's. She had gone into the boxes I had stored in the master closet and taken my dead wife's robe. The rage that hit me was so white and hot that my vision blurred for a second. "What are you doing, Brenda?" I asked, my voice trembling with the effort to keep from screaming. "I am making this place safe." "Thaddeus," she said, blowing on the coffee, "I do not trust those digital locks. Hackers can get into them. Or the battery dies and you are locked out. I like a good old-fashioned deadbolt, something solid." "That smart lock cost $500, I said. "It is connected to the security system. You cannot just drill it out." "Too late," she said, shrugging. "This man says he can put in a high-security mechanical lock. I feel safer with a real key in my hand." She reached into the pocket of Rose's robe and pulled out the electronic fobs I had given Gavin the night before. The fobs that controlled the gates, the garage, and the front door. "Here," she said. She tossed them into the air. They arched over the porch railing and landed with a clatter in the large metal trash can I kept by the garage. "We won't be needing those anymore," she said. "We are going analog." She looked at the locksmith. "Keep drilling," she ordered, "and make sure you give me all the copies of the new keys. I don't want just anyone walking in here." She looked directly at me when she said it. I stood there watching the drill bite into the mahogany. I watched sawdust spill onto the porch. I watched her turn and walk back into my house wearing my wife's robe, drinking my coffee, destroying my property. She thought she was locking me out. She thought she was taking control. She did not realize that by removing the smart lock, she had just disconnected the front door from the central server. She had just created a blind spot in the system, a blind spot I could use. I walked over to the trash can and looked inside. The electronic fobs were sitting on top of a pile of pizza boxes from their late-night feast. I reached in and picked them up. I wiped a pepperoni slice off one of them. "You want to play games, Brenda?" I whispered to the empty yard. I put the fobs in my pocket. "You just handed me the keys to your own prison." The smell of burnt bacon woke me up before my alarm did. It was a thick, greasy stench that clawed its way under the door of the storage room I was now calling home. I lay on the narrow cot for a moment, staring at the unfinished ceiling joists. In my old life as the owner of Freeman Construction, I would have fired a framing crew for spacing joists like that, but right now, structural integrity was the least of my worries. I sat up and rubbed my aching back. My joints were stiff from the cold concrete floor. I walked into the kitchen expecting to find Keisha cooking, but it was Stan sitting at the head of my custom walnut dining table. He was wearing a stained white undershirt and boxer shorts. His bare feet were propped up on the table surface right next to a plate of scrambled eggs. "Morning, Thaddeus?" He grunted without looking up from his phone. "Coffee pot is empty. Brew another one, would you? And make it strong this time." Yesterday's batch tasted like dishwater. I stopped in the doorway, my hands curled into fists at my sides. This man was eating my food sitting at my table and ordering me around like I was on his payroll. "The coffee beans are in the pantry, Stan," I said, keeping my voice even. "The grinder is on the counter. Help yourself." Stan finally looked up. He lowered his phone slowly and gave me a look that was half amusement and half disdain. He let out a short, sharp laugh and shook his head. "Come on, Thaddeus, don't be like that," he said, gesturing vaguely with his fork. "You are already standing up. Besides, you people have a knack for this sort of thing, right? You must be used to serving others. It is in your blood or something, isn't it?" The silence in the kitchen was absolute. The refrigerator hummed. A bird chirped outside. But inside my head there was only a roaring static. It was a microaggression so sharp it felt like a paper cut across the throat. He was smiling, but his eyes were cold and hard. He was testing me. He wanted to see if the old black man would bow his head and shuffle over to the coffee pot. I looked at the knife block on the counter. I looked at the heavy cast iron skillet on the stove. Then I looked at Stan's smug red face. I walked over to the coffee maker. I did not say a word. I ground the beans. I filled the water reservoir. I pressed the button. Attaboy Stan chuckled, returning to his eggs. I knew you were a good guy, Thaddeus. Just needed a little direction. I poured him a mug of black coffee and set it down on the table. I placed it hard enough that a little bit sloshed over the rim and stained the walnut wood. Oops, I said, my face completely blank. My hand slipped. Stan glared at me, but he picked up the mug. I turned and walked out of the kitchen. I did not run. I did not shout. I walked with the slow, deliberate pace of a man who knows exactly where the load-bearing walls are and exactly how to bring them down. I went back downstairs, but I did not go to my cot. Instead, I walked to the far wall of the utility room where the main electrical panel was located. I reached behind a stack of paint cans and pressed a hidden latch in the drywall. A section of the paneling popped open, revealing a keypad. Stan thought I was just a retired builder. He thought this was just a cottage in the woods. He did not know that for the last 10 years of my career, I specialized in high-security residential contracts for politicians and tech moguls. I knew how to build safe rooms. I knew how to build panic bunkers. And I knew how to wire a house so that the walls had ears. I punched in my code. A secondary door slid open, revealing a rack of servers that hummed with blue light. This was the heart of the house. When Brenda had the locksmith drill out the front door, she thought she had cut me off. She was wrong. That was just the surface layer. I sat down at the control console and woke up the monitors. The screens flickered to life, showing me high-definition feeds of every room in the house. I had hidden 4K cameras inside the motion detectors. There were pinhole lenses concealed in the vintage brass chandeliers. The smoke detectors were actually wide-angle fish-eye cameras. I saw Stan in the kitchen wiping egg yolk off his chin. I saw Brenda in the master bathroom digging through my medicine cabinet. I saw Keisha in the guest room crying while she changed Leo's diaper, but the video was not enough. I needed to hear them. I toggled the switch for the audio sensors. I had installed high-gain microphones behind the drywall in every room. I originally told myself it was for voice-activated home automation, but deep down, I think I knew. I think I always knew I would need to protect myself. The sound came through my headphones crystal clear. I could hear Stan chewing. I could hear the water running in the bathroom. Then I saw Gavin. He was walking down the hallway looking over his shoulder. He slipped into the powder room near the front door and locked it. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. I adjusted the volume on the feed from the powder room. The sound of the exhaust fan was loud, but the noise-canceling software filtered it out instantly, leaving only Gavin's voice. "Yeah, it is me," Gavin hissed into the phone. "No, do not call me on the landline. Are you crazy?" He paused, listening to someone shouting on the other end. He looked sweaty. His eyes were darting around the small room. "Listen, Tony, I know I am late," Gavin said, his voice trembling slightly. "But I have a solution. I am at the lake house right now. Yeah, the one I told you about. It is a mansion, Tony. It is worth $2 million easy." He paused again, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. "No, the old man is still here," Gavin said. "But he is stupid, Tony. He is just a dumb old bricklayer. He doesn't know what he is sitting on. I already have the papers drawn up. I just need to get him to sign." I leaned closer to the screen. My heart was beating a slow, steady rhythm. A dumb old bricklayer. "Yeah, I have a plan," Gavin continued. "We are going to pressure him, make him feel guilty. Use the kid if we have to. He is soft, Tony. He is weak. I will have him sign the transfer deed by the end of the week. I promise. Just give me until Friday." He listened for a moment longer, then swallowed hard. "Okay, Friday. I will have the money or the deed. You have my word." Gavin hung up the phone and slumped against the door. He looked at himself in the mirror and practiced a smile. It was the fake, charming smile he used on my daughter. Then he unlocked the door and stepped out. I sat back in my chair in the cold basement. I saved the audio clip to a secure cloud server. Then I saved it to a backup drive. Then I emailed a copy to my lawyer, Rothstein. Gavin thought I was weak. Stan thought I was a servant. They were making the classic mistake of the amateur demolition crew. They were swinging the hammer before they checked the blueprints. I looked at the screen where Gavin was now walking back into the kitchen, clapping Stan on the back. "You want me to sign papers, Gavin?" I whispered to the empty room. I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out a fresh notebook. "I will sign whatever you want, but you are going to be the one paying the price." The peace of my Saturday afternoon was murdered by the sound of cheap bass rattling the windows. A convoy of vehicles that looked like they belonged in a rap video rental lot rolled up my long driveway. There were 3 Lexuses, a Range Rover, and a bright yellow Corvette that scraped its bottom on every gravel bump. Gavin was throwing a housewarming party. The only problem was that it was not his house and I was not invited. I was, however, expected to work. Gavin came out to the deck where I was sitting. He was wearing linen pants and a shirt unbuttoned halfway down his chest, trying to look like a Hamptons billionaire. He clapped his hands together. "Pop, great news," he said. "Some of my colleagues from the realty firm are coming over. Just a small get-together to network. I need you to fire up the grill. I bought 20 pounds of ribeye and some lobster tails. Make sure you do not overcook them." I looked at him over the rim of my reading glasses. "I am not your chef, Gavin," I said. "Come on, Thaddeus, do not embarrass me," he hissed, leaning in close. "These people are important. They think this is my place. If you play along, I might be able to get that loan I need to pay off my debts. You want me to pay off my debts, don't you?" He did not wait for an answer. He turned around and walked toward his guests, arms wide open like he was the lord of the manor. "Welcome to the estate, everyone," he shouted. "Make yourselves at home." I watched as 20 strangers swarmed my property. They were loud and already drunk. They walked on the grass with heels. They smoked cigars and flicked the ashes into the lake. I stood by the massive stainless steel grill I had installed last summer and felt a familiar weight settle in my stomach. It was the weight of being invisible in my own creation. I lit the burners. I seasoned the meat. I cooked for them because I knew that if I did not, Gavin would take it out on Keisha later. I watched them eat my food and drink my wine. I heard Gavin telling a blonde woman in a tight dress about how he designed the deck himself. "This is just my weekend spot," Gavin lied loudly, swirling his glass. "My early inheritance, you could say. The old man is just the caretaker. We let him stay in the guest quarters to keep the place running." The blonde woman laughed and looked at me with pity. I flipped a steak and imagined it was Gavin's face. I said nothing. I just cooked and observed. As the sun went down, the party moved inside. The air grew chillier and the mosquitoes came out, so the herd migrated into my living room. I followed them in to clean up the mess they left behind. The noise inside was deafening. Someone had cranked up the stereo system. Stan was holding court on the sofa telling a story about his glory days in high school football, while Brenda refilled drinks from my premium liquor cabinet. Then I heard the crash. It came from the center of the room. A young man in a blue suit who had been swaying unsteadily for the last hour stumbled. He was holding a full glass of red wine. He tried to catch himself on the edge of the coffee table, but missed. He pitched forward, and the wine went flying. It landed on the rug. It was not just a rug. It was a hand-woven Persian silk masterpiece that Rose and I had bought in Istanbul on our 40th anniversary. It had taken us 3 years to save for that trip. We had haggled with the merchant for hours, drinking tea and laughing. That rug was the centerpiece of the room. It was the physical memory of the happiest week of my life. The dark red liquid splashed across the cream and gold patterns, soaking into the fibers instantly. The young man gagged and then vomited right on top of the wine stain. The room went silent for a second. Then laughter broke out. "Oops, party foul!" someone shouted. I stood frozen in the doorway. The tongs were still in my hand. My knuckles turned white as I gripped the metal. My heart stopped beating and then restarted with a violent thud that shook my whole body. That was Rose's rug. That was her memory. Brenda walked over to the mess. She looked at the vomit and the wine destroying a piece of art worth $10,000. She looked at me standing there with murder in my eyes. She waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, relax, Thaddeus," she cackled, her voice cutting through the music. "It is just a rug. It is old anyway. Look at it. It is practically threadbare. Just throw it out. We can get a nice new one at Walmart for $50, something with a nice floral print. Just a rug. Throw it out." The world narrowed down to a tunnel. All I could see was Brenda's face and the metal tongs in my hand. I took a step forward. The muscles in my arm coiled. I wanted to clamp those tongs onto her nose and drag her out of my house. I wanted to smash Gavin's head through the drywall. I wanted to burn the whole place down just to purify it. But then I saw Keisha. She was standing in the corner holding Leo tight, her eyes wide with terror. She was shaking her head slightly, begging me silently not to do it, not to explode. I stopped. I took a breath that shuddered in my lungs. I looked at the rug. It was ruined. But if I reacted now, if I gave in to the violence, they would win. They would call the police. They would say I was crazy. They would use it to take control. I lowered the tongs. I turned around and walked out the back door into the cool night air. I walked until I was in the shadow of the garage where no one could see me. I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely type. I opened the secure messaging app. I found the contact labeled Rothstein, execute protocol 66. I typed. I hit send. Then I opened the smart home app on my phone. I had bypassed the main control panel, but I still had administrator access through the backdoor code I wrote myself. I scrolled down to the water heating system. The house used a high-efficiency tankless system that supplied endless hot water to the 5 bathrooms, the kitchen, and the outdoor jacuzzi where 6 of Gavin's friends were currently soaking. I tapped the icon. I slid the temperature bar from 104 degrees down to 40 degrees. Then I engaged the system lock. I waited. It took about 30 seconds for the residual hot water to clear the pipes. The first scream came from the master bathroom where Brenda had gone to take a soak in my tub. It was a high-pitched shriek of shock. "Ah, it is freezing!" she yelled. Then came the shouts from the jacuzzi outside. "Hey, what happened to the heat? It is ice cold." Inside the house, the kitchen faucet sputtered. Someone trying to rinse a glass swore loudly. "What is going on?" Gavin shouted, running into the kitchen. "Why is the water cold? Dad, check the boiler." I stood in the darkness of the yard and listened. The music stopped. The laughter died. The comfortable warmth of the house was replaced by the chill of confusion and discomfort. People started grabbing their towels and jackets. The party mood was broken instantly by the shock of freezing water. "This place is a dump," someone muttered as they walked past me to their car. "Cannot even take a warm shower." I watched them leave one by one. The yellow Corvette scraped its bottom again on the way out. Gavin was running around apologizing, blaming the old plumbing, blaming the grid, blaming me. I did not move. I just stood there in the dark, holding my phone, watching the lights go out in my house, watching my enemies shiver. The rug was ruined. But the war had just escalated, and I was done playing defense. The sound of a reciprocating saw tearing through drywall is a sound I know well. It is the sound of progress on a job site. But when I heard it coming from my own living room at 8 in the morning, it sounded like a violation. I ran out of my room still buttoning my flannel shirt. The living room was covered in a fine layer of white dust. Stan was standing in the middle of the room, pointing a finger like he was Napoleon commanding troops. There was a man in dusty overalls holding a massive sawzall. He was pressing the blade against the central wall that separated the living area from the kitchen. "Open it up," Stan shouted over the noise of the saw. "I want an open concept. We are going to put a wet bar right there. It will make the place look less like a hunting cabin and more like a modern villa." The saw blade bit into the plaster. Dust sprayed into the air. "Stop!" I roared. My voice was louder than the saw. It was the voice I used to command crews of 200 men over the roar of excavators and pile drivers. The worker flinched and pulled the trigger back. The blade stopped reciprocating. The silence that rushed back into the room was heavy. "What is your problem?" Thaddeus Stan snapped, turning to face me. He brushed drywall dust off his polo shirt. "We are improving the property value. You should be thanking me. This layout is ancient. Nobody likes walls anymore." I did not look at Stan. I looked at the worker. He was a young guy, maybe 30, wearing a tool belt that looked too new. He looked nervous. I walked past Stan and stood directly in front of the wall. I placed my hand on the plaster right where he had started to cut. I could feel the vibration of the house settling. I could feel the weight above it. "Do you know what is behind this drywall, son?" I asked the worker. My voice was low and calm, but it had the weight of concrete. The worker looked at Stan, then back at me. "Just studs, man," he said, shrugging. 2x4s. We just gotta cut them out and put in a header." "No big deal. No big deal," I repeated. I tapped the wall. "This is not a partition wall. This is a load-bearing shear wall. Inside here are 3 microlam LVL beams laminated together. They are supporting the entire ridge beam of the cathedral ceiling. That roof creates a point load of approximately 40,000 pounds right here." I took a step closer to the worker. I saw his eyes widen. "If you cut those studs without installing a steel I-beam and temporary shoring towers first, the roof structure will suffer a catastrophic failure. It will not just sag, it will snap. 10 tons of solid white oak and slate roofing will come down in less than 2 seconds. It will flatten you, it will flatten him, and it will destroy this house." The worker lowered the saw. He looked at the ceiling, then back at the wall. He was doing the math in his head and realizing he had almost killed himself. I turned to Stan. "You want an open concept, Stan?" I asked. "If he makes that cut, the only thing open will be your skull." Stan turned purple. He sputtered, trying to find a retort. "You are just trying to scare us, Thaddeus," he said. "You are just a retired tinkerer. What do you know about modern engineering?" The worker dropped the saw. It clattered on the floor. He took a step closer to me, squinting at my face. "Wait a second," he said. He looked at my hands, then at my face. "Freeman. You are Thaddeus Freeman." I looked at him. "I am." The worker's face went pale. He took off his cap. "Oh my God," he whispered. "You are the guy who built the suspension bridge over the gorge. You are the guy who saved the downtown stadium when the foundation cracked. My dad worked for you. He said you could smell a bad weld from 50 feet away." He turned to Stan, his expression changing from subservience to anger. "You did not tell me this was Freeman's house," he shouted at Stan. "Are you crazy? You told me to cut a load-bearing wall in a Freeman house. Do you know who this guy is? He is a legend. If I cut that beam, my license would be revoked before the dust settled. I am out of here." He grabbed his saw and started packing his gear frantically. "Wait!" Stan yelled, running after him. "I am paying you double. Finish the job." "Not for triple," the worker said, backing toward the door. "I am not touching this house. I value my life." "Sorry, Mr. Freeman." I did not know. He ran out the door, leaving a trail of dust. The front door slammed shut. I stood there looking at Stan. The silence was absolute. He stood amidst the dust of his own stupidity, looking like a deflated balloon. His attempt to assert dominance had not just failed, it had been crushed by the weight of my reputation. He did not know who I was. He thought I was just Gavin's father-in-law. He had no idea he was living in the house of a man who had built the city's skyline. "Clean this up, Stan," I said, pointing to the floor. "Every speck of dust." I turned to go back to my room, but the front door opened again. It was not the worker coming back. It was Gavin. He walked in carrying a thick manila envelope. He looked at his father holding a broom. He looked at the hole in the wall, and he looked at me. He did not ask what happened. He did not care. He walked straight to the dining table and slammed the envelope down. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "Enough games," he said. His voice was shaking, but not with fear. It was shaking with adrenaline. He pulled a stack of legal documents out of the envelope. He spread them out on the table next to Stan's cold coffee. "Sit down," Thaddeus Gavin ordered. I did not sit. I stood my ground, my arms crossed over my chest. "What is this, Gavin?" I asked. "It is the solution," Gavin said. He tapped the paper with his index finger. "It is a loan guarantee, $500,000, collateralized by this property." I looked at the papers. I saw the bank logo. I saw the high interest rate. I saw the line for the guarantor's signature. "You want me to mortgage my home to pay your debts?" I asked. My voice was flat. "Not just my debts," Gavin said. "Our debts. This family needs money. I need capital to get my business back on track. And you are sitting on $2 million of equity in the middle of the woods doing nothing. It is selfish. I am not signing that, Gavin," I said. "I thought you might say that," Gavin said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He unlocked it and turned the screen toward me. It was a video. It showed Keisha sitting in a car crying. In the back seat, Leo was sleeping in his car seat. "If you do not sign this paper by noon today," Gavin said, his voice dropping to a whisper, "I am filing for divorce. I have already spoken to a lawyer. I will paint Keisha as unstable. I will use her history of depression against her. I will take full custody of Leo." My heart stopped. He was threatening to take my grandson. He was threatening to destroy my daughter. "You will never see him again," Thaddeus Gavin continued. "I will move to the other side of the country. I will change his name. You will die alone in this house wondering what your grandson looks like. Or you can sign the paper. You sign the paper, we stay happy. We stay a family." I looked at Gavin. I looked at the greed and desperation in his eyes. He was a cornered rat, and rats bite. He was not asking for a loan. He was holding my family for ransom. I walked over to the table. I looked down at the document. I looked at the pen lying next to it. "You are a piece of work, Gavin," I said. "Just sign it, old man," Gavin spat. I picked up the pen. My hand hovered over the signature line. I need my reading glasses, I said. I cannot see the fine print. You do not need to read it, Gavin said. Just sign. I am not signing anything I cannot read, I said, dropping the pen. I will go get them. I turned and walked away. I walked toward my room. But I was not going to get my glasses. I was going to get my laptop. Gavin thought he had me. He thought the threat of losing Leo was the checkmate. But he had made a critical error. He had put the paperwork in front of me. And Thaddeus Freeman never signs a contract without finding the loophole. I entered my room and locked the door. I sat down at my computer. I opened the program I used to scan documents. You want a signature, Gavin? I whispered. I pulled up the file of Gavin's financial history I had hacked the night before. I will give you a signature, but it won't be the one you want. I walked back into the main room with my reading glasses perched on the end of my nose. My daughter Keisha was sitting at the table with her head in her hands. Her shoulders were shaking. She looked up when I entered, and the despair in her eyes almost broke my resolve. She stood up and grabbed my arm. Her grip was weak and desperate. Daddy, please, she whispered so low that Gavin could not hear from the kitchen. You have to do this. He is serious. He will take Leo. He has been talking to lawyers for weeks. He says I am unfit because of my anxiety. He says he will tell the judge I am a danger to my own son. Please, Daddy, save us. I looked at my daughter. I saw the little girl who used to follow me around job sites wearing a plastic hard hat. I saw the woman who had been beaten down by years of emotional abuse until she believed she was worthless. I wanted to hug her. I wanted to tell her that I had already initiated a plan that would liberate her. But I could not. She was too fragile. If she knew, she might give it away. I gently patted her hand. It is okay, baby girl, I said loud enough for Gavin to hear. I am just going to read the papers. I need to know what I am signing. I sat down at the head of the table. Gavin walked over and stood behind me. I could feel his impatience radiating off him like heat. He tapped his foot on my hardwood floor. Just sign the last page, Thaddeus, he said. It is standard boilerplate. Banks need a lot of paper to lend money these days. You know how it is. I ignored him. I licked my thumb and turned the first page. I forced my hands to tremble slightly. I squinted at the text even though my vision was 20/20 with the glasses. I read slowly, moving my lips like a man who struggles with big words. I saw Gavin roll his eyes and check his watch. I was playing the part of the slow, senile old man perfectly. I read through the first 10 pages. It was a high-interest loan agreement, just like I thought. Predatory terms, variable rates that would skyrocket in 6 months. But then I turned to page 12. It was tucked between a mandatory arbitration clause and a flood insurance waiver. It looked like just another addendum. But I spent 40 years reading contracts. I knew how to spot a poison pill buried in a mountain of legalese. The header was in a slightly different font. It read, "Voluntary inter vivos transfer of real property." I read the paragraph underneath. It was not a loan guarantee, it was a deed of gift. The document stated that upon signing the loan agreement, the guarantor, which was me, agreed to immediately transfer full title and ownership of the property to the borrower, which was Gavin, as a condition of the loan facilitation. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my face remained a mask of confusion. Gavin was not asking me to co-sign a loan. He was tricking me into signing over the deed to my house. He was stealing my home right in front of my face. If I signed this, he would own the property instantly. He could kick me out 5 minutes later. He could sell it to pay his debts and leave me homeless. It was the most vicious piece of legal trickery I had ever seen. He must have paid a crooked lawyer a fortune to draft this. "You are taking a long time," Thaddeus Gavin said, leaning over my shoulder. His breath smelled of stale coffee and anxiety. "Do you need me to explain the big words?" I looked up at him. I let my mouth hang open slightly. "This part here," I said, pointing to the poison pill with a shaking finger. "It says transfer of title. Does that mean the bank holds the title?" Gavin laughed. It was a nervous sound. "Yeah, Pop, exactly. It just means the bank holds the paper until the loan is paid. Standard stuff. Do not worry your head about it. Just sign the line. We are running out of time." He reached for the pen and tried to press it into my hand. I looked at the paper. I looked at the ink. I looked at the mug of cold coffee sitting next to Stan's elbow. I knew I could not sign. But if I refused now, he would know I was on to him. He would escalate. He would take Leo and run. I needed to destroy the evidence without revealing my hand. I needed an accident. I reached for the pen with my right hand. At the same time, my left hand swept across the table in a spasm. It was a calculated movement. My knuckles hit the ceramic mug hard. The mug tipped. A wave of cold black coffee washed across the table. It soaked into the papers instantly. The white pages turned brown and heavy. The ink began to bleed. The document became a sodden mess in seconds. "Oh no," I cried, standing up and knocking my chair over. "Look what I did. I am so clumsy. My hands, they just do not work like they used to." Gavin screamed. It was a high-pitched sound of pure frustration. He grabbed the papers, trying to shake the liquid off, but they tore in his hands. The gift deed ripped right down the middle. "You stupid old fool," Gavin yelled, his face turning purple. "Look what you did. You ruined it. Those were the originals." "I am sorry, son," I stammered, backing away. "I just wanted to sign. I am so sorry." Gavin threw the wet pulp onto the floor. He looked like he was about to hit me. Stan stood up, looking ready to join in. "We have to go back to town," Gavin shouted. "We have to get the lawyer to print another set. We are going to miss the bank's deadline for today." He glared at me. "You are lucky you are old Thaddeus. We are going to town. We will be back tonight. And tomorrow morning you are signing the new copies without reading a single word. Do you understand me?" I nodded, keeping my head down. "Yes, Gavin. I understand." They stormed out of the house. Stan followed them, muttering about nursing homes. Keisha ran to her room crying. I waited until I heard the car tires crunch on the gravel. Then I straightened my back. The tremor in my hands vanished. I walked over to the mess on the floor and picked up the torn pieces of the contract. I took them to the sink and burned them until they were nothing but ash. I had bought myself 24 hours, but I needed more than time. I needed ammunition. Night fell heavy over the woods. The house was silent. Gavin and his parents had returned late, drunk and angry, and had passed out in the master suite. I waited in my storage room until the clock on my laptop read 3 in the morning. I put on my soft-soled work boots. I slipped a small black flash drive into my pocket. I opened my door and moved into the main house. I moved like a shadow. I knew where every floorboard creaked because I had nailed them down myself. I stepped over the spots that groaned. I ghosted past the master bedroom where Stan was snoring like a chainsaw. I went to the guest room where Gavin had set up his temporary office. The door was ajar. I pushed it open. The room smelled of cheap cologne and desperation. Gavin's laptop was sitting on the desk. A small green light pulsed on the side, indicating it was in sleep mode. I sat down in the chair. I woke the computer. A password prompt appeared. I smiled. Gavin was a man of little imagination. I tried his birthday. Incorrect. I tried his car model. Incorrect. Then I tried the name of the mistress I had heard him whispering to in the bathroom. Vanessa 123. Access granted. I plugged in my flash drive. I ran a script I had written myself. It was a simple program designed to mirror the hard drive. It began to copy everything: emails, financial records, chat logs, the hidden folder labeled offshore. I watched the progress bar crawl across the screen. 90%. 95. Suddenly, I heard a noise in the hallway. Footsteps. Heavy and slow. Someone was getting up to use the bathroom. I froze. The light from the screen illuminated my face in the dark room. 98%. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. The handle began to turn. "Come on," I whispered to the machine. 99. The door opened. 100. I yanked the drive out and slammed the laptop shut just as the hallway light flooded the room. "Who is in here?" Stan's voice grumbled sleepily. I spun the chair around. I was holding a bottle of aspirin I had grabbed from the desk. "Just me, Stan," I said, my voice calm. "Looking for something for my headache. This weather kills my joints." Stan squinted at me, his eyes bleary. He was wearing his underwear and scratching his stomach. "Get out of here," he growled, "and turn off the damn light." I stood up and walked past him, clutching the aspirin and the flash drive in my pocket. "Sorry, Stan," I said. "Good night." I walked back to my room, my heart beating a steady rhythm against my ribs. I had the data. I had the proof. Gavin thought he was the shark. He did not know he was swimming in a tank with a leviathan. I sat down at my own computer and plugged in the drive. I opened the first file. It was not just debts. It was not just loans. I looked at the screen and a cold smile spread across my face. "Gavin, my boy," I whispered. "You are not just broke. You are a felon. and tomorrow I was going to introduce him to the consequences. I walked into the great room just after lunch and found Brenda standing on a chair. She was holding her phone up high, trying to get a better angle of the oil painting hanging above the fireplace. It was a landscape of the Mississippi Delta painted by a renowned artist from New Orleans. I had paid $8,000 for it at an auction in 1995. It was worth triple that now. Brenda snapped a photo and then climbed down. She looked at me with a dismissive sneer. "Just doing some decluttering, Thaddeus," she said, smoothing her polyester skirt. "This place is full of junk. It is oppressive. We need to make room for my Hummel figurines." I looked around the room. My collection of first-pressing jazz vinyl records was stacked haphazardly on the floor. My antique grandfather clock, which had been in my family for 3 generations, had a yellow sticky note on the glass front. "What are you doing with my records, Brenda?" I asked. My voice was calm, but my pulse was thumping in my ears. "Getting rid of them," she said, waving her hand. "Nobody listens to records anymore. It is all digital, Thaddeus. Get with the times." I found a nice young man online who wants to buy the whole lot. And the painting, too. And that dusty old clock. She was selling my life. She was selling my history on the internet for pennies. I walked over to the stack of records. The one on top was a signed copy of John Coltrane's A Love Supreme. It was priceless to me. "You cannot sell these," I said. "They are not yours. Possession is 9/10 of the law," she shot back. "You are living under my son's roof now, technically. And since you are not paying rent, think of this as your contribution to the household expenses. Besides, I already listed them on Facebook Marketplace. I have buyers coming in an hour. So unless you want to cause a scene and embarrass Gavin, you will step aside." She turned her back on me and started typing on her phone. I stood there for a moment watching her. She was not just a thief, she was a vandal. She saw no value in anything that did not have a designer logo or a price tag from a mall. She was selling my heritage to buy plastic junk. I wanted to grab the records. I wanted to throw her out. But then I remembered the plan. I remembered the long game. Theft was a crime. But selling stolen goods across state lines or selling high-value items under false pretenses, that was a felony. That was prison time. I needed her to complete the transaction. I needed the money to change hands. I backed away slowly. "Fine, Brenda," I said. "Just be careful with the clock. It is heavy." She laughed. "Do not worry, old man. It will be gone before dinner." I went straight to my command center in the storage room. I pulled up Facebook Marketplace on my laptop. It took me 30 seconds to find her profile. She was listing under the name Brenda the Boss. There it was, my Coltrane record, my painting, my grandfather clock. The prices made me want to vomit. She had listed the painting for $500. The records were $50 for the box. The clock was listed as Old Wooden Clock, $1,000. She was selling $50,000 worth of assets for less than $2,000. I picked up my burner phone. I dialed a number I knew by heart. Big Mike picked up on the second ring. Mike was my former foreman. He was 6'5", 300 pounds of solid muscle and loyalty. He had been with me since the 80s. "Mike," I said, "I need you to do a job for me." Thaddeus Mike's deep voice rumbled. "You name it, boss. I am there. I need you to buy some things, Mike. I need you to come to my house in 1 hour with your truck. I need you to buy everything the lady is selling. Do not haggle. Pay her asking price. But here is the catch. You have to pay her electronically. Venmo or Zelle. I need a digital paper trail directly to her personal account." "Consider it done, boss," Mike said. "Is this the woman giving you trouble?" "She is," I said. "I will put on my acting shoes." Mike chuckled. "See you in an hour." I watched on the security monitors as Mike's black pickup truck rolled up the driveway exactly 50 minutes later. Mike stepped out wearing a grease-stained t-shirt and a baseball cap pulled low. He looked like a man who bought junk for a living. Brenda went out to meet him. I could see her eyes light up when she saw the size of the truck. She thought she had found a sucker. I stayed in my room watching the feed. I saw Mike point to the painting. I saw Brenda nod vigorously. I saw Mike point to the clock. Brenda patted the wood like a used car salesman. Then came the moment of truth. Mike pulled out his phone. I switched to the audio feed. "I do not carry cash, ma'am," Mike said, his voice gravelly. "Can I Zelle you the money?" "Oh, absolutely," Brenda chirped. "Cash is so dirty anyway. Here's my username." She held out her phone. Mike scanned it. I opened my laptop and logged into the banking monitoring software I had installed. I tracked the transaction. Ding! $1,550 transferred from Michael Johnson to Brenda Miller. It was done. She had accepted the money. She had sold property that did not belong to her. I watched as Mike loaded my precious belongings into his truck. He handled the clock with a gentleness that belied his size. He knew what it meant to me. He wrapped the painting in a moving blanket. He put the records in the passenger seat. "Pleasure doing business with you, ma'am," Mike said, tipping his cap. "You too, honey," Brenda said, waving. "Tell your friends I have more stuff coming next week." Mike drove away, taking my memories to safety. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. I waited 10 minutes, then walked upstairs. Brenda was sitting at the dining table showing her phone to Stan. They were celebrating with a bottle of my wine. "Look at this," Stan, Brenda crowed. "I made almost $2,000 in 20 minutes. That old junk was just gathering dust. I am a genius." Stan laughed and slapped the table. "That pays for the new rims on the truck," he said. "Good work, babe. You squeezed blood from a stone." I walked into the kitchen to get a glass of water. "Did you sell everything, Brenda?" I asked, my face a mask of defeat. Every scrap, she bragged, and I got top dollar too. That big idiot did not even try to negotiate. I probably could have gotten more if I waited, but cash in hand is king, right? "Right," I said. "You certainly are a businesswoman, Brenda." She did not hear the sarcasm. She was too busy transferring the money from her Venmo to her main bank account. I walked back to my room and sat down at my desk. I opened a new file on my computer labeled Evidence. I uploaded the screenshots of her Facebook listings. I uploaded the digital receipt Mike had just texted me. I uploaded the original appraisal documents for the painting and the clock. Brenda thought she had made a quick profit. She thought she had cleared out some trash. She did not know the difference between petty theft and grand larceny. In our state, theft over $1,000 is a felony. Theft over $10,000 is a Class C felony carrying a minimum of 3 years in prison. The items she had just sold were valued at over $52,000. She had not just sold a clock and some records. She had just sold her freedom. I looked at the screen and smiled a cold, humorless smile. "Enjoy the money, Brenda," I whispered. "You are going to need it for the commissary." The trap was set, the bait was taken, and the jaws were beginning to close. But I was not done yet. Gavin still needed to learn his lesson, and his lesson was going to be even more expensive. It was 3 in the afternoon when the knock came on my storage room door. It was not the aggressive pounding of Gavin or the entitled rapping of his mother. It was a soft, hesitant sound like a bird hitting glass. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. Keisha was standing there holding an iPad in her trembling hands. Her face was a map of devastation. Her eyes were swollen almost shut, and her breathing was ragged and shallow. She looked like she had just survived a car crash. "Daddy," she whispered, and her voice cracked into 1,000 pieces. "You were right. You were right about everything." She pushed past me into the room and collapsed onto the small cot. She curled into a ball, clutching the tablet to her chest like it was a shield. I closed the door and locked it. I did not rush to hug her. I knew that right now she did not need a hug. She needed a witness. "What did you find, Keisha?" I asked, sitting down in my office chair. She held out the iPad. Her hands were shaking so hard the screen was a blur. "He left it unlocked," she sobbed. He was in the shower. A message popped up. It was from a woman named Vanessa. I took the tablet. I did not need to guess who Vanessa was. I had already heard Gavin talking to her in the bathroom, but I needed Keisha to see it with her own eyes. I scrolled through the message thread. It was a catalog of betrayal. There were photos of Gavin and a blonde woman drinking champagne in a hotel room. There were receipts for expensive dinners. But the most damning message was the one that had come in 10 minutes ago. Vanessa wrote, "When are you going to kick the old man out, baby? I am tired of waiting. I want to see the lake house." And Gavin had replied, "Just a few more days. I am going to force him to sign the deed this week. Once the property is in my name, I will put him in a state home, and then you can move in. We will redecorate everything. Finally, I will be free of that whining wife and her brat." I looked up from the screen. Keisha was watching me, tears streaming down her face. "He called me a whining wife," she choked out. "He called Leo a brat. He is planning to bring her here, Daddy. Into your house. Into the home you built for Mom. He wants to replace me." I set the iPad down on the desk. I felt a cold fury settling in my chest, but I kept my face impassive. "He is not just replacing you, Keisha," I said. "He is erasing you. I thought we were broke," she cried, putting her head in her hands. "He told me we had no money for rent. He told me he could not afford Leo's preschool tuition. He made me beg you for a place to stay because he said we were destitute. But look at those messages, Daddy. He bought her a diamond bracelet last week. Where did he get the money? This was the moment. This was the turning point. I could have just comforted her. I could have told her it would be okay. But Thaddeus Freeman does not deal in platitudes. I deal in structural realities. And the reality was that my daughter needed to stop being a victim and start being a Freeman. I turned to my computer monitors. I woke the screens. The blue light illuminated the dark room. "Stop crying, Keisha," I ordered, my voice sharp. She looked up, startled by my tone. "Come here," I said, pointing to the chair next to me. "Look at this." She wiped her eyes and stood up, moving to the chair. I opened the file I had copied from Gavin's hard drive. I pulled up the spreadsheet labeled offshore accounts. "You want to know where he got the money?" I asked. "He did not earn it selling houses. He stole it." I pointed to the columns of numbers. "These are accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland," I explained. "Look at the dates. He started siphoning money 3 years ago when he was working as a property manager for that commercial firm. He was padding the maintenance invoices and skimming the difference. That is why he got fired, Keisha. He was not laid off like he told you. He was fired for embezzlement, but they did not prosecute because they did not want the bad press." Keisha stared at the screen. Her mouth fell open. "There is over $800,000 in here," she whispered. I nodded. "He is not poor, Keisha. He is rich. He has nearly $1 million sitting in accounts you cannot touch. He made you live in a cramped apartment with broken heating. He made you wear old clothes. He made you beg your father for shelter. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He is hoarding that money for himself and his new life with Vanessa." I pulled up another document. It was a credit card statement from a secret account. "Look at this charge," I said, pointing to a line item. $3,000 for a weekend at the Ritz-Carlton in Miami. That was the same weekend he told you he was going to a real estate conference in Cleveland. Keisha let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "I was eating ramen noodles that weekend," she said, her voice trembling with a new emotion. Rage. "I stayed home with a sick toddler and ate ramen because he said we had to tighten our belts, and he was at the Ritz." "Ooh." "He is a miser, Keisha," I said. "He is a thief and a liar. But worst of all, he thinks you are stupid. He thinks you are weak. He thinks he can walk all over you, take your inheritance, and discard you like trash." I turned in my chair to face her fully. "The question is, are you going to let him?" Keisha looked at the screen again. She looked at the money he had hidden. She looked at the messages where he mocked her. Slowly the tears stopped. Her breathing steadied. She sat up straighter. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, and when she looked at me, her eyes were dry and hard. They were my eyes. "No," she said. "No, I am not." "Good," I said, "because crying time is over. Now it is working time." I reached into my desk drawer. I pulled out a small black device about the size of a matchbox. It was a high-fidelity voice-activated recorder with a magnetic back. "I need you to do a job for me," I said, holding it out. "What is it?" she asked, taking the device. "Gavin does most of his business in his car," I said. "He thinks it is a private space. He makes calls to his lawyer. He makes calls to his mistress. He makes calls to the men helping him launder that stolen money. I need ears in that vehicle." Keisha looked at the recorder. She turned it over in her hand. A day ago, she would have been too scared to touch it. She would have been terrified of Gavin finding out. But the woman sitting in front of me now had seen the invoice for the diamond bracelet. She had seen the balance in the Swiss bank account. The fear had burned away, leaving only cold determination. "Where do you want it?" she asked. "Under the driver's seat," I instructed. "Stick it to the metal frame. He will never look there. Can you do it right now?" Keisha stood up. She smoothed her shirt. She gripped the recorder tightly in her fist. "He is taking a nap," she said. "The keys are on the dresser." "Go," I said. She walked to the door. She paused with her hand on the latch and looked back at me. "Daddy," she said. "Yeah, baby girl." "Make him pay," she said. "Make him lose everything." I nodded slowly. "That is the plan, Keisha. That has always been the plan." She slipped out of the room, closing the door silently behind her. I watched on the monitor as she walked down the hallway. Her step was light. Her head was high. She went into the bedroom where Gavin was sleeping. A minute later, she came out holding his keys. She walked out the front door and headed for the driveway. I switched camera feeds to the exterior view. I saw my daughter open the door of Gavin's BMW. She leaned in. She reached under the seat. She stayed there for 10 seconds. Then she stood up, locked the car, and walked back toward the house. She did not look back. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled. I had my spy. I had my evidence. And now I had an ally inside the enemy camp. Gavin thought he was fighting a lonely old man. He did not know he was now fighting a Freeman War Council. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the lake. The water looked black and cold. It was the perfect setting for what was coming next. Gavin had promised his loan shark he would have the house by Friday. Today was Wednesday. The pressure was building. He was going to make a move soon. And when he did, we would be ready. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Keisha. Done. He is waking up. He says he has a surprise visitor coming tonight to appraise the house. He says it is just for insurance. I smiled. An appraiser at night. That was not an appraiser. That was a buyer. Gavin was trying to sell the house out from under me before the ink was even dry on the papers he had not yet forced me to sign. Let him come, I whispered. I opened a new program on my computer. It was a voice modulation software. If Gavin wanted to play games with fake appraisers, I would play along. But I was going to direct the scene. I typed a reply to Keisha. Get Leo and stay in your room tonight. Do not come out no matter what you hear. Then I stood up and walked to the closet. I took out my old work overalls, the ones with the paint stains and the rips. I took out a pair of thick glasses with taped frames that I used for costume parties years ago. Gavin wanted a senile old man. Tonight I was going to give him the performance of a lifetime. The high beams of a black Escalade swept across my living room window like searchlights at a prison break. It was 9 at night and the woods were pitch black. No honest appraiser visits a property after dark. This was a shadow deal. I watched from the kitchen shadow as Gavin rushed out the front door, buttoning his blazer. He looked manic. He looked like a man trying to sell a sinking ship while the water was already at his ankles. I adjusted my taped glasses and hunched my shoulders. I shuffled my feet to practice the gait of a man whose joints had turned to rust. I was not Thaddeus Freeman the engineer anymore. I was Thaddeus the confused groundskeeper. The driver's door of the SUV opened and a man stepped out. He was not an appraiser. I knew his type immediately. He wore a suit that cost more than Gavin's car, but he wore it without a tie. He had the dead shark eyes of a man who lent money at 40% interest and collected with a baseball bat. This was a cleaner. A man who turned distressed assets into liquid cash for criminals. Gavin shook his hand too vigorously. Mr. Vargas. Welcome, Gavin said, his voice pitching high. Thank you for coming so late. The property is spectacular at night. Very private. Vargas did not smile. He looked at the house with the expression of a butcher sizing up a carcass. Let us make this quick, he said. His voice sounded like gravel in a blender. I have a flight to Vegas in 3 hours. Show me the structure. They walked up the steps. I waited until they were in the foyer before I made my entrance. I shuffled out of the hallway holding a feather duster like a scepter. Who is there? I called out, my voice wavering. Is that you, Martha? Did you bring the soup? Gavin froze. He turned to me, his eyes wide with panic. He had clearly forgotten to tell Vargas that the house came with a live-in resident. Who is this? Vargas asked, pointing a manicured finger at me. Oh, nobody, Gavin stammered, stepping between us. Just the gardener. He is a little touched in the head. He comes with the property, but we are moving him to a facility next week. Ignore him. I blinked behind my thick lenses. I walked right up to Vargas and squinted at his chest. You are not Martha, I said. You smell like cigars and bad decisions. Vargas took a step back, brushing his lapel where I had almost touched him. Get him out of here, he growled at Gavin. Go to your room, Thaddeus. Gavin hissed, grabbing my arm. Go to sleep. I pulled my arm away. I cannot sleep, I said loudly. The scratching is too loud tonight. Vargas paused. He looked at the ceiling. Scratching, he asked. What scratching? Gavin tried to laugh. Oh, nothing. Just tree branches on the roof. It is windy tonight. It is not branches, I said, leaning in close to Vargas confidentially. It is the bugs, the big ones. They eat the wood. Listen. I tapped my knuckle against the solid oak paneling of the hallway. It made a solid thud because it was perfect timber. But I shook my head sadly. Hollow, I whispered. All hollow. The termites got into the foundation back in '98. They say the whole house is floating on sawdust. One big wind and whoosh down it goes into the lake. Gavin turned pale. That is a lie, he shouted. This house is solid stone and oak. He does not know what he is talking about. Vargas narrowed his eyes. He looked at the floorboards. He shifted his weight, testing the floor. Termites are expensive to fix, he muttered. Even if he is crazy, I have to deduct for inspection. I did not stop there. I shuffled toward this kitchen, beckoning them to follow. Watch your step, I warned, pointing at a perfectly level transition strip. The ground is sinking. The neighbor says this land actually belongs to him. He shoots at us sometimes, says the property line runs right through the refrigerator. Vargas stopped walking. Legal disputes, he asked, looking at Gavin. You said the title was clean? It is clean, Gavin insisted, sweating profusely. There is no neighbor. The nearest house is 2 miles away. That is what Old Man Jenkins wants you to think, I cackled. He hides in the bushes, with his shotgun. Pow, pow. I made shooting motions with my hands. Vargas actually flinched. He was a city criminal. He understood bribes and contracts. He did not understand crazy hillbillies with shotguns. The idea of a boundary dispute involving firearms made him nervous. It meant police reports. It meant attention. I do not like complications, Gavin Vargas said, his voice dropping an octave. You told me this was a turnkey flip. Termites. Shooters. This sounds like a money pit. It is not, Gavin pleaded. He is just senile. Look at the craftsmanship. Look at the view. He dragged Vargas toward the back deck, sliding open the glass doors. Just look at the lake, Gavin said, gesturing to the black void. We stepped out onto the deck. The air was crisp and cold. The woods were silent, until I triggered the sound system. I had a remote in my pocket. I pressed the button. From the hidden speakers mounted in the trees 50 yards away came a sound that tapped into the primal brain of every human being. It was the howl of a timber wolf, and then another, and another. It sounded like a pack was surrounding the house. Vargas jumped. He reached inside his jacket, instinctively reaching for a weapon. What the hell was that, he snapped. Puppies, I said, smiling dreamily. Big, hungry puppies. They ate the mailman last week. That is why we do not get bills anymore. They are always hungry at night. Best go inside before they smell your cologne. The howls grew louder, artificially amplified to sound like they were right under the deck. Vargas backed into the house and slammed the glass door shut. He looked at Gavin with pure disgust. Wolves, he said. You have a wolf infestation. They are protected, Gavin stammered. It is nature. It adds rustic charm. Rustic charm, Vargas spat. I cannot flip a house where the new owners might get eaten. This is a disaster, he checked his gold watch. I am done wasting time. You said the appraisal was $2 million. It is worth 2.5, Gavin said, desperate. With the termites, the legal dispute, and the predators, I will give you 600,000, Vargas said. Cash. Take it or leave it. 600, Gavin choked. That barely covers my debt. I need at least $1 million to clear the books and have startup capital. You cannot do this to me, Tony. I am not doing anything, Vargas said, buttoning his jacket. The market is speaking. The house is a liability. 600. Offer expires in 10 minutes. I cannot sell for that, Gavin whispered. He looked defeated. He looked broken. Then find another buyer, Vargas said. He turned and walked out the front door without looking back. The black SUV roared to life and tore down the driveway, leaving a cloud of dust and red taillights. Gavin stood in the foyer, staring at the door. His shoulders were shaking. The deal was dead. His salvation was gone. He was still drowning in debt, and now he had no lifeline. He turned slowly to face me. I was standing by the stairs holding my feather duster, my face a mask of innocent confusion. Did the nice man leave? I asked. He did not finish his tea. Gavin's face twisted. It was not a human expression. It was a mask of pure, unadulterated hate. The vein in his forehead bulged. His hands curled into claws. You, he whispered. He took a step toward me. You ruined it, he screamed. You senile old bat. You destroyed everything. He grabbed a heavy crystal vase from the entry table and threw it. It smashed against the wall inches from my head, showering me with glass shards. I did not flinch. Gavin marched toward me. He was not the slick real estate agent anymore. He was a violent, desperate animal. You think this is funny? He shouted, spitting saliva as he spoke. You think you can play games with my life? I owe people money, Thaddeus. Dangerous people. If I do not pay them, they are going to hurt me. And if I am going down, I am taking you with me. He grabbed me by the collar of my overalls. He was strong, fueled by adrenaline and rage. He slammed me against the wall. My head hit the wood paneling with a crack. It hurt. It really hurt. "Sign the papers," he roared, shaking me. "Sign the papers now, or I swear to God I will beat you until your brain really is mush." I looked into his eyes. I saw the intent. He was not bluffing. He was past the point of negotiation. He was ready to kill me to get what he wanted. I let my body go limp. I let my eyes roll back slightly. "Okay," I wheezed. "Okay, Gavin. I will sign. Just do not hurt me." He dropped me. I slid down the wall to the floor, rubbing my neck. "Get up," he ordered. "Get to the table. We are finishing this tonight." I struggled to my feet. I shuffled toward the kitchen. Gavin followed me close, breathing hard. He thought he had won. He thought violence had solved his problem. He did not know that the camera in the hallway had recorded the assault in 4K resolution. He did not know that the audio sensors had picked up his threat to kill me. And he did not know that I was leading him not to the table but to the spot where I had loosened the floorboards earlier that day. I was going to sign, but I was going to sign with his blood. Gavin shoved me toward the kitchen table so hard I stumbled and caught myself on the back of a chair. My shoulders screamed in protest, but I did not make a sound. Stan was already standing there, blocking the hallway to the bedrooms, his arms crossed over his chest, like a bouncer at a dive bar. The kitchen was brightly lit, exposing every line of desperation on Gavin's face. He was sweating profusely, the moisture beading on his forehead and soaking the collar of his expensive shirt. He looked like a man who had been running a marathon at full speed only to find a brick wall at the finish line. "Sit down, old man," Gavin snarled, pointing at the chair. I sat slowly, my movements deliberate and shaky. I was still playing the part of the confused senior citizen, but my mind was racing at 100 miles an hour, calculating angles and exit strategies. "Where are the papers?" Gavin demanded, his voice cracking. He began tearing through the pile of documents on the counter, scattering mail and magazines across the floor. He found the fresh copy of the deed of gift he had printed out earlier that day. He slammed it onto the table in front of me. "Sign it," he screamed. "Right now." I looked at the paper, then up at him. I blinked rapidly behind my thick-taped glasses. "I do not have a pen," I whispered, my voice trembling. Gavin let out a guttural roar of frustration. He reached into his jacket pocket, but instead of a pen, he pulled out something else. It was a gun. It was a small, snub-nosed revolver, cheap and black. It looked like something he had bought in a parking lot from a stranger. His hand was shaking so badly the barrel waved around in the air, pointing first at the fridge, then at the window, and finally at my chest. Gavin Stan shouted, stepping forward, his eyes wide. "What are you doing, son? Put that away! Shut up, Dad!" Gavin yelled without looking away from me. "I am done waiting. I am done playing nice. Tony said Friday. It is almost Thursday. I am not losing my kneecaps because this old fool wants to play games." He pressed the barrel of the gun against my temple. The metal was cold and smelled of gun oil. "Sign the paper!" Thaddeus, Gavin hissed, his breath hot in my ear. "Sign it, or I swear to God I will paint this kitchen with your brains. I will tell the police you attacked me. I will tell them it was self-defense. Who are they going to believe? The successful businessman or the senile old man who sees wolves in the yard?" I felt the pressure of the trigger against his finger. He was on the edge. One sudden move, one wrong word, and he would snap. "Okay," I stammered, letting tears well up in my eyes. "Okay, Gavin, please do not shoot. I will do whatever you want." Gavin grabbed a pen from the counter and threw it at me. It skittered across the table. I picked it up with trembling fingers. "Sign it," he ordered, backing up a step but keeping the gun leveled at my head. I looked at the signature line. It was waiting there like an open grave. I knew that signing this document under duress made it legally void, but proving duress later would be difficult without witnesses, unless the signature itself was the proof. I pressed the pen to the paper. I did not sign Thaddeus Freeman. I did not use my normal bold architectural script. Instead, I let my hand shake violently. I scrawled a jagged, illegible line that looked vaguely like letters. But in the middle of the mess, I added 3 distinct loops. It was a code Rothstein and I had established years ago when we dealt with union contracts. 3 loops meant coercion. It meant the document was poison. "Done," I whispered, dropping the pen. Gavin snatched the paper from the table. He looked at the signature, his eyes wild. "It looks like chicken scratch," he muttered. "It is the best I can do," I whined, rubbing my wrist. "My hands hurt, Gavin." You hurt me. Good enough, Gavin said, folding the paper and shoving it into his pocket. It is notarized by my guy anyway. This is it. It is done. He looked at me then. The adrenaline was starting to fade, leaving behind a cold, cruel reality. He had what he wanted. Now I was just a loose end. I was a witness. I was a liability. He looked at Stan. Stan looked back, his face unreadable. We have the house, Gavin said. Now we just need to get rid of the tenant. Gavin turned back to me. A sneer curled his lip. You are useless now, old man, he said. He stepped forward and shoved me. It was not a playful push. It was a violent, two-handed thrust, designed to hurt. I flew backward. My chair tipped over. I flailed my arms, trying to catch myself, but it was too late. I fell hard. My head struck the sharp corner of the granite kitchen island on the way down. There was a sickening crack. A flash of white light exploded behind my eyes. Then came the pain, sharp and hot, searing through my skull. I hit the floor in a heap. Warm wetness spread across the back of my neck. I could feel it pooling on the hardwood floor. Blood. A lot of it. I lay there stunned. The room spun. My vision blurred. "Oh my God!" Stan shouted. "Gavin, you killed him! Look at the blood!" I heard Gavin breathing hard, hyperventilating. He fell. Gavin stammered. He slipped. "You saw it, Dad. He tried to attack me and he slipped. He is bleeding out," Stan yelled, dropping to his knees beside me. I felt Stan's hands on my neck, checking for a pulse. I made a split-second decision. I let my body go completely limp. I stopped moving. I slowed my breathing down to the shallow rhythm I had learned in the Army sniper's course decades ago. I let my eyes roll back and flutter shut. "Is he dead?" Gavin whispered, his voice high with panic. Stan pressed his fingers into my carotid artery. I kept my breathing shallow, barely moving my chest. "He is alive," Stan said after a long pause. "But he is out cold. That is a bad cut, Gavin. He needs stitches." "We cannot call the cops," Gavin said, pacing the floor. His footsteps were erratic. "If they see the gun, if they see the bruise on his neck from where I grabbed him, they will know." "Put the gun away, you idiot," Stan snapped. "Hide it in the woods." "We are not calling the cops. We are calling an ambulance." "An ambulance?" Gavin asked. "Listen to me," Stan said, his voice dropping to a cold, calculating register. "This is an opportunity. Look at him. He is old. He is confused. He was hallucinating about wolves earlier. Now he has had a fall, a traumatic brain injury." So Gavin asked, stopping his pacing. "So," Stan continued, "we tell the paramedics he had an episode. He got agitated. He started screaming about people stealing his house, and he fell. We tried to catch him, but we were too slow. It is a tragedy." I lay there listening to them rewrite history. My head throbbed with a pulse that felt like a hammer, but I did not twitch. And then Stan said the words that sealed their fate. "While he is in the hospital, we tell the doctors he cannot live alone anymore. We show them the bruises. We say he is a danger to himself. We get him admitted to a facility directly from the hospital. We bypass the legal hearing. It is an emergency placement." Gavin let out a breath. "A nursing home." "Exactly," Stan said. "Shady Pines is 20 miles away. It is a dump, but they take Medicaid and they do not ask questions if you slip the administrator a few $100. We dump him there. With the deed signed and him locked away, medicated out of his mind, the house is yours, free and clear." I felt a wave of cold fury wash over me that was stronger than the pain in my skull. They were not just stealing my property. They were planning to imprison me. They were going to lock me away in a warehouse for the dying and let me rot while they sold my legacy. "Do it," Gavin said. "Call 911. I heard Stan fumbling with his phone. "Make sure you sound sad," Stan told his son. "Cry if you can." I lay in the puddle of my own blood and waited. I focused on the pain. I used it. I sharpened it. They thought they were sending me to prison. They did not know they were sending me to my army. The medical system was not a strange land to me. I sat on the board of directors for the largest healthcare network in the state. I owned the land Shady Pines was built on. "Call the ambulance, Stan," I thought, as the darkness crept in at the edges of my vision. "You are just giving me a ride to my headquarters." The ambulance ride was a masterclass in gaslighting. I lay strapped to the gurney, my head throbbing with a rhythm that matched the siren's wail. The young paramedic was trying to clean the blood from my neck, his face a mask of professional concern. Gavin sat on the bench opposite me, his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. To the untrained eye, he was a son shattered by his father's decline. To me, he looked like a man terrified the corpse might wake up and point a finger. "Where am I?" I croaked, letting my voice crack and waver. I let my eyes dart around the confined space, mimicking the panic of the disoriented. Gavin looked up. His eyes were dry, hard flints of coal. "You had a fall, Dad," he said, his voice pitched loud enough for the medic to hear every word. "You got confused again. You started screaming about wolves in the yard. You tried to hit me and you slipped on the rug." I looked at the medic. "Wolves," I whispered. "I don't like wolves." The medic nodded sympathetically. "It's okay, sir. We're taking you to get checked out." "Who are you?" I asked Gavin, letting my gaze slide off him as if he were a stranger. Gavin turned to the medic, a tragic smile plastered on his face. "See? He's gone. It's the dementia. It's been getting worse for months. He doesn't even know his own son." The medic scribbled something on his clipboard. "We should take him to County General," he said. "They have a trauma unit for that head wound. It looks deep." "No," Gavin interrupted too quickly. "No hospitals. He gets violent in hospitals. It triggers his PTSD. We have a prearranged admission at a specialized facility, Shady Pines. It's just a few miles from here. His doctor is waiting for him there. Please take him there. It's in his file." The medic hesitated. "That's irregular, sir. Protocol says—" "Please," Gavin begged, grabbing the medic's arm. "He's a danger to himself and others. Shady Pines is the only place equipped to handle his episodes. I have power of attorney. I'm taking full responsibility." He didn't have power of attorney. He had a forged document in his pocket and a desperate need to hide the body. The medic looked at me, then at Gavin. He sighed and keyed his radio. "Change of destination. We're diverting to Shady Pines." I closed my eyes. Shady Pines. I knew the place. It was a low-budget warehouse for the forgotten, a place where families dumped their problems to die quietly of bedsores and neglect. Gavin thought he was burying me in a hole. He didn't know he was delivering the CEO to the boardroom. The ambulance backed up to the loading dock of Shady Pines. The air smelled of industrial disinfectant, boiled cabbage, and urine. It was the scent of despair. They wheeled me through the back entrance, bypassing the lobby. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed with an annoying flicker, casting a sickly green pallor over the peeling beige walls. We passed a common room where old men and women sat in wheelchairs staring at a television that was turned off. They looked like ghosts waiting for permission to leave. Gavin walked beside the stretcher, typing furiously on his phone. He was probably texting Stan. "The Eagle has landed." They parked me at the intake desk. A nurse with tired eyes and a coffee stain on her blue scrubs looked up from her computer. She didn't even look at me. She looked at the paperwork. "Name?" she asked, popping her gum. "Thaddeus Freeman," Gavin said. "Emergency admission. He's indigent. Medicaid pending. No private insurance." He was stripping me of my identity. He was making me a ward of the state, a number in a file. The nurse sighed and started typing. "Freeman, Thaddeus, date of birth." Gavin rattled off the information. I watched the nurse's face through half-closed lids. She typed in my social security number. She hit enter. Suddenly the computer screen flashed red. A loud, urgent chime echoed through the quiet lobby. The nurse stopped chewing her gum. She frowned and hit the enter key again. The screen flashed brighter, a gold banner scrolling across the top of the monitor. Strategic partner, board member, level alpha priority. The nurse's eyes bugged out. She looked at the screen, then she looked at the old man in dirty overalls with dried blood on his neck strapped to a gurney. She looked back at the screen. "Sir," she said to Gavin, her voice trembling. "Are you sure this is the right social—" "Yes," Gavin snapped, tapping his foot. "What is the problem? Just admit him. Put him in the basic ward. He won't know the difference." The nurse ignored him. She picked up her desk phone and dialed a 3-digit extension. Her hands were shaking. "Mr. Henderson," she whispered into the receiver. "You need to come to the front desk. Now. It's a code gold. Yes, it's him." 2 minutes later, the double doors behind the desk burst open. A short, balding man in a cheap polyester suit came running out. He was sweating. His tie was crooked. It was Larry Henderson, the facility director. I had hired him 5 years ago when my investment group bought this chain of nursing homes as a distressed asset turnaround project. I had interviewed him personally. He was a good administrator, terrified of failure. Henderson skidded to a halt in front of the desk. He looked at the screen. He looked at me. His face went the color of chalk. He opened his mouth to shout, "Mr. Freeman." I caught his eye. I raised one finger to my lips. A tiny, almost imperceptible gesture. Shh. Henderson froze. He was a smart man. He realized instantly that something was wrong. The owner of the company, the man who signed his paychecks, was being checked in as an indigent patient by a nervous man in a blazer. He swallowed hard. He wiped the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. He straightened his tie. "Is there a problem here?" Henderson asked, his voice tight. Gavin turned to him. "Yeah, the problem is your nurse is slow. I need to get this man admitted. He's senile. He has no money. I'm his son-in-law. I'm doing him a favor. Just put him in a bed and I'll sign whatever." Henderson looked at me again. I gave him a slight nod. "Play along." "Of course," Henderson said, clearing his throat. "My apologies. Our system was just updating. We have a bed available in the West Wing. It's our basic care unit." "Fine," Gavin said. "Whatever is cheapest. He doesn't need extras." Henderson typed something into the computer, overriding the VIP alert. "We will take good care of him," Henderson said. Gavin signed the admission papers with a flourish. He declined the optional meal plan. He declined the television rental. He declined the physical therapy add-on. He checked the box for minimal life support measures. He stripped every comfort away. "You're all set, Mr. Freeman," Henderson said, handing Gavin a copy of the receipt. Gavin looked at me one last time. I stared blankly at the ceiling, drooling a little for effect. "Goodbye, Thaddeus," Gavin whispered, leaning in close. "Don't wait up." He turned and walked out the automatic doors. The moment the doors slid shut and the sound of Gavin's BMW roared away, Henderson dropped the act. He rushed around the desk. "Mr. Freeman, oh my God," he gasped. "What happened? Who did this to you? Do you want me to call the police? I can have the VIP suite prepared in 5 minutes. We have the lobster bisque from the executive kitchen." I sat up. I wiped the drool from my chin. The fog in my eyes cleared instantly. "No police, Larry," I said, my voice firm and commanding. "And no lobster." "But sir, you're bleeding," Henderson stammered. "It's a superficial wound," I said. "Get the on-call doctor to stitch it up here. Do not transfer me." And Larry listened to me very carefully. I climbed off the gurney. My head spun, but I steadied myself against the desk. "I am a patient here. A poor broke patient named Thaddeus. I want to be put in the worst room you have. I want the room with the drafty window. I want the lumpy mattress. And I want you to bring me a copy of every single bill, every invoice, and every refusal of service that man just signed." Henderson looked confused. "Sir, I don't understand. Why would you want to stay in the West Wing?" "Because I am conducting an audit, Larry," I said. "A very personal audit. That man thinks he dumped me in a hole. He doesn't know he just handed me the shovel to bury him." I looked down the hallway toward the West Wing. "Put me in room 302, I said. "The one next to the nurse's station. I want to hear everything. And Larry, bring me a laptop. A secure one." "Yes, sir," Henderson said. "Right away." I walked down the hallway. The smell of bleach was stronger here. I saw the other patients looking at me with hollow eyes. They saw another victim. I saw witnesses. I entered room 302. It was a small gray box with a single metal bed. I sat down on the thin mattress. I pulled out the small notebook I had hidden in my sock. I opened it to a fresh page. Crime 1. Abandonment of a vulnerable adult. Crime 2. Medical neglect. I looked at the peeling paint on the wall. This was not a prison. This was my war room, and I had just gone deep undercover. I sat on the lumpy mattress in room 302 of Shady Pines, watching my life's work being destroyed on a 14-inch laptop screen. It was 2 in the morning. The nurse had just checked my vitals and left assuming I was asleep, but I was wide awake. I was plugged into the surveillance feed of the lake house, witnessing a fever dream of greed and stupidity. Stan and Gavin were in the living room. They were drunk. A bottle of my single malt scotch was empty on the floor. They were not celebrating their victory over me. They were arguing about money. It is not enough. Dad Gavin slurred, pacing a circle on my Persian rug, which was now stained with wine and vomit. "The house is worth $2 million, but we cannot sell it for months. The probate court takes time. Even with the deed, it takes time. I need cash now. Vargas wants his money. The loan sharks want their money. I need liquidity." Stan leaned back in my leather chair, scratching his belly. He looked around the room with a bleary, conspiratorial grin. "You know, Gavin," he said, his voice thick, The old man is paranoid. He does not trust banks. He never did. Back in the day, he used to joke about it. I leaned closer to the screen. I remembered that joke. It was 10 years ago at a barbecue. I had told Stan that the only safe place for a man's retirement was under his own 2 feet. I was talking about investing in real estate. I was talking about the land itself. He buried it, Stan whispered, leaning forward. I bet you anything. He buried gold. Or cash. He buried it right here. Gavin stopped pacing. He looked at his father. Buried it where Gavin asked. Under the floor, Stan said, pointing at the wide plank white oak floorboards. It is a raised foundation. There is a crawl space, but there is also a subfloor. That is where the old-timers hid their stash. He spent 5 years building this place alone. Why did he take so long? Because he was building a vault. It was the logic of a fool. It was the fantasy of a man who had never worked for $1 in his life. But to a desperate man like Gavin, it sounded like salvation. You think so, Gavin whispered. I know so, Stan insisted, standing up and swaying. I saw him once carrying a heavy metal box into the house late at night. He never brought it out. It is under there, son. Hundreds of thousands. Maybe millions. Gold bullion. I shook my head in the dark hospital room. That heavy box had been my specialized toolkit for the radiant heating system. But greed has a way of turning tools into treasure maps. Gavin looked at the floor. He looked at the walls. The desperation in his eyes shifted into a manic hunger. We have to find it, he said. Get the sledgehammer, Stan said. Get the crowbar. We are going treasure hunting. I watched in horror as they went to the garage. They came back armed with heavy demolition tools. Tools that were meant to build, not destroy. This is it, Stan shouted. He raised the 10-pound sledgehammer over his head and brought it down with a sickening crunch onto the pristine oak floor. The wood splintered. The finish shattered. I flinched in my hospital bed as if he had hit me. That floor was hand-selected. I had planed every board. I had laid it perfectly level. Gavin joined in with a crowbar. He jammed the metal claw into the gap Stan had created and heaved. The wood groaned and snapped. They ripped up a 4-foot section of flooring, exposing the plywood subfloor underneath. It is not here, Gavin yelled, sweating. Dig her deeper, Stan roared. It is in the walls. It is in the pillars. They went into a frenzy. It was a scene of pure madness. They moved from the floor to the walls. Stan took the sledgehammer to the custom-built bookshelves. He smashed the drywall looking for a safe that did not exist. He shattered the stone surround of the fireplace. Dust filled the air. The house looked like a war zone. They were destroying the asset they had stolen to find a treasure that was not there. I switched cameras. I saw Brenda in the kitchen tearing open the cabinets, ripping off the baseboards. She was looking for hollow spaces. They tore apart the living room. They destroyed the hallway. They even started on the load-bearing column I had warned them about earlier. Gavin hit the column with the sledgehammer. The whole house vibrated. Dust fell from the ceiling rafters. Keep going, Stan cheered. It has to be inside. They were not just vandalizing the house. They were compromising its structural integrity. If they kept going, the roof would collapse. It was time to stop the show. I picked up my burner phone. I texted Big Mike. Now. Mike was parked 2 miles down the road waiting for my signal. He had been waiting for 3 hours. On the screen, I saw headlights flash in the driveway. A white truck with an amber light bar on the roof pulled up. It looked official. It looked like authority. Mike stepped out. He was wearing a high-visibility vest, a hard hat, and he was carrying a clipboard. He looked like the wrath of the county. He walked up to the front door, which was hanging open on broken hinges. He stepped over the debris. Stan and Gavin froze mid-swing. They looked like deer caught in headlights. They were covered in white dust, holding weapons of destruction. "Who are you?" Gavin shouted, his voice cracking with fear. "Get off my property!" Mike did not flinch. He looked at the hole in the floor. He looked at the smashed drywall. He looked at the damaged support column. "I am the county building inspector." Mike boomed, his voice filling the ruined room. "We received seismic alerts from this location indicating unpermitted structural demolition." "Seismic alerts?" Gavin stammered. "That is impossible." Mike stepped forward, kicking a piece of my oak flooring aside. "I see major violations of Code 17, Section 4, he announced, making it up as he went. "You have compromised the shear wall. You have destabilized the load path. This structure is now categorized as imminent collapse. He pulled a roll of bright red tape from his belt. He pulled a pad of orange stickers from his pocket. "What does that mean?" Stan asked, dropping the hammer. "It means this house is a death trap," Mike said. "By the authority of the County Building Commission, I am condemning this property effective immediately." He slapped a massive orange sticker on the remaining part of the wall. "Dangerous. Do not enter. Unsafe for human occupancy. You have 5 minutes to vacate the premises," Mike ordered. "Grab your essentials and get out. If you remain inside, you will be arrested for reckless endangerment and violation of a condemnation order." "But we live here," Brenda shrieked, coming out of the kitchen. "This is our house." "Not anymore," Mike said. "Not until a structural engineer clears this building. And looking at that column, nobody is clearing this for 6 months. Out. Now." He started stringing the red danger tape across the living room, herding them toward the door. "But my clothes," Gavin whined. "My laptop." 5 minutes, Mike barked, pointing at his watch. "Or I call the sheriff." Panic set in. They scrambled. They grabbed coats. They grabbed purses. They ran out of the house, leaving their destruction behind. They stood in the driveway, covered in dust, coughing, looking back at the dream house they had turned into a condemned ruin. Mike walked out onto the porch. He locked the front door with a heavy padlock hasp he had brought with him. He drilled it into the frame, sealing the house tight. He taped the orange notice to the front door. "Stay off the property," he warned them. "The ground stability is compromised. Go to the road." He got in his truck and waited, watching them. Gavin, Stan, and Brenda stood in the dark driveway. They had no keys. They had no house. They had no gold. And then the first drop of rain fell. I watched on the monitor as the sky opened up. It was a cold, hard rain. A storm was coming in off the lake. "Get in the car," Gavin yelled, running toward his BMW. But when he pulled the handle, it was locked. The keys were inside the house, buried under the rubble of the drywall they had smashed. They were trapped outside, in the rain, in the dark, staring at a warm house they could not enter. I closed my laptop in the hospital room. I lay back on the pillow. The pain in my head was still there, but it was duller now. It was replaced by the warm glow of justice. They wanted to live in my house. Now they could live in my yard. And the weather forecast called for a long, cold night. The sky over the lake turned a bruised purple color that I knew well. It was the color of a deep bruise on skin, and it meant only one thing. A storm was coming. A real storm. Not a summer shower, but a driving, freezing squall coming down from the north. I watched the weather radar on my laptop screen in the hospital room. A massive cell of red and orange was sweeping across the county directly toward my property. On the security feed, the scene outside my house was pathetic. Gavin, Stan, and Brenda were huddled inside a tent that Gavin had pulled from the trunk of his BMW. It was a cheap nylon thing meant for backyard sleepovers, not for surviving a gale on a lakefront. They had pitched it right in the middle of the mud puddle that used to be my prize-winning lawn. The rain started as a mist, but within 10 minutes it was coming down in sheets. It was a cold, hard rain that turned the dirt to sludge. I could see the tent fabric sagging under the weight of the water. The wind picked up, whipping the trees around the clearing. Inside the tent, I could imagine the misery. They were pressed together, cold and wet, smelling of sweat and drywall dust. They had no food. They had no water. And right in front of them, just 20 yards away, stood my house. Even condemned and dark, it looked like a fortress. It was dry inside. It was insulated. It was everything they had taken for granted and everything they had just lost. Stan crawled out of the tent flap. He stood in the pouring rain, looking up at the house. He looked like a drowned rat. He shouted something at the house, shaking his fist, but the wind stole his words. He was angry at the wood and stone for not sheltering him. He was angry at the world for consequences he had brought upon himself. I took a sip of the lukewarm hospital water. It tasted like champagne. Then the wind shifted. A gust came off the lake, hitting the property with the force of a freight train. The cheap aluminum poles of the tent snapped with a sound I could hear even over the audio feed. The nylon collapsed, wrapping around them like a wet shroud. Brenda screamed. It was a thin, high sound of pure panic. The wind caught the edge of the collapsed tent. It lifted it up. For a second it looked like a giant balloon, and then it ripped away. The tent tumbled across the yard, tumbling over and over until it snagged on the fence line. They were exposed. Brenda was sitting in the mud, wearing her expensive blouse, which was now plastered to her skin. Her hair was matted to her skull. She looked around wildly, her eyes wide with terror. "I cannot do this," she shrieked. "I am freezing. Gavin, do something. Get us inside." Gavin scrambled to his feet. He slipped in the mud and went down on one knee, ruining his linen pants. He got up again, desperate. The back door, he shouted over the wind. The inspector only padlocked the front. Maybe the electronic lock on the back deck still works. They ran toward the house. They scrambled up the steps to the back deck, slipping on the wet wood. They crowded around the glass door. There was a digital keypad there. It was the one entry point Mike had not physically boarded up because he knew I had control of it. Gavin punched in the code. 1, 2, 3, 4. It was the code I had given him the first day. The code he thought made him the master of the house. The keypad light flashed red. Access denied. He punched it again, faster this time. His fingers were shaking. "It is not working," he yelled, hitting the panel with his fist. "Try again," Stan roared, shivering behind him. "Try your birthday. Try your mother's birthday." Gavin tried every combination he could think of. He tried 1111. He tried 0000. Every time the light flashed red. I sat in my hospital bed holding my phone. I had the app open. I could see the access attempts logging in real time. Invalid code. Invalid code. Invalid code. I had changed the master code 10 minutes ago. I had set it to a sequence of numbers they would never guess. It was the date I founded my company. The date I started building the life they were trying to steal. Brenda was sobbing now, pounding on the glass with her open palms. "Let us in," she wailed. "Please, Thaddeus, I know you can hear me. Open the door. We will die out here." She was pressing her face against the glass. Inside the house was dark and silent. It was dry. The radiant floor heating I had installed kept the ambient temperature at a steady 68 degrees. It was heaven on the other side of that glass. And they were in hell. Gavin grabbed a patio chair. He raised it over his head, ready to smash the glass. "Do not do it," Stan warned, grabbing his arm. "The alarm. If you break the glass, the silent alarm trips. The police will be here in 5 minutes. We are already trespassing. If they catch us breaking and entering after a condemnation order, we go to jail tonight." Gavin lowered the chair. He dropped it. He leaned his forehead against the cold glass and screamed. It was a sound of pure impotence. He was a man who had always bought his way out of trouble or bullied his way through. Now he had no money and no power. He was just a wet man in a storm. They huddled together in the corner of the deck, trying to find shelter under the eaves. They were shivering violently. Hypothermia was a real possibility, but I knew the temperature was not lethal yet. It was just miserable. It was the kind of cold that settles in your bones and makes you rethink every decision you have ever made. Then Gavin's phone buzzed. He ignored it at first. He was too busy trying to warm his hands under his armpits, but it buzzed again and again. He pulled it out of his pocket, shielding the screen from the rain with his hand. I watched his face on the security camera. The blue light of the screen illuminated his features. I saw confusion first, then shock, then a devastation so deep it looked like his soul had left his body. It was a message from Keisha. I had sent my private driver to pick up Keisha and Leo 2 hours before the storm hit. I had given them the key to my penthouse apartment in the city. It was a property I kept secret, a place I used for business meetings and escaping the noise of the world when I was still working. It was on the 40th floor. It had marble floors, a gas fireplace, and a view of the skyline that cost $3 million. Keisha had sent him a photo. I pulled up the sent message on my own phone to look at it again. It was a selfie. Keisha was sitting on a plush white sofa wrapped in a cashmere blanket. Leo was sitting next to her holding a mug of hot cocoa with marshmallows. In the background, a fire was crackling in the fireplace. The room was bathed in golden warm light. They looked safe. They looked rich. But most importantly, they looked happy. The caption read, "We are safe. Daddy took care of us. Do not come looking for us. We are done." Gavin stared at the phone. The rain ran down his face, mixing with the tears that were starting to form in his eyes. He looked from the screen to the dark, cold house in front of him. "She left me," he whispered. His voice was barely audible over the wind. "She is in a mansion. She is warm." Brenda grabbed his arm. "Who?" she demanded. "Who is in a mansion?" "Keisha," Gavin said, dropping his hand. "He took us to a shack in the woods, but he has a penthouse in the city. He played us. He played us all." Stan snatched the phone. He looked at the photo. He looked at the marble fireplace. He looked at the expensive furniture. "He is rich," Stan choked out. "He is not just comfortable. He is rich. And we are sleeping in the mud." Gavin slid down the wall until he was sitting on the wet deck boards. He put his head in his hands. "He won," Gavin said. "He took my wife. He took my son. And he left me here to rot." I watched them on the screen. The justice of it was poetic. They had tried to throw me away like garbage to steal a cottage. In doing so, they had thrown away the keys to the kingdom. They were wet, cold, and defeated. But the night was not over. And there was one more visitor coming to the party. A visitor who did not care about rain or cold or misery. A visitor who only cared about his money. The sun rose over the wreckage of my yard like a spotlight on a crime scene, revealing the full extent of the misery below. The mud was drying into a hard crust on Stan and Brenda's clothes. They looked like statues of despair shivering in the morning chill. Gavin was pacing back and forth by the locked gate, trying to get a signal on his phone to call a taxi or a lawyer or anyone who could save him. He did not know that his reception was blocked because I had activated a signal jammer from my hospital bed. I wanted them isolated. I wanted them to feel the silence of the woods before the noise of their reckoning arrived. And the noise arrived at 9 in the morning. It was not a taxi. It was a matte black pickup truck with oversized tires and a brush guard that looked like it could punch through a brick wall. It roared up the driveway, bypassing the electronic gate I had unlocked remotely just for this moment. The truck skidded to a halt inches from Gavin's BMW. A man stepped out. He was not wearing a suit like Vargas. He was wearing jeans, combat boots, and a tight black t-shirt that struggled to contain muscles built by years of violence. He was bald with a scar running from his ear to his jaw. He held a heavy steel tire iron in his hand, swinging it casually by his side. This was not a negotiator. This was the consequences. Gavin froze. He recognized the man, Kruger. Gavin whispered, his face losing all color. Kruger did not say a word. He walked straight to the yellow BMW. He did not look at Gavin. He looked at the car like it was a personal insult. He raised the tire iron over his head and brought it down on the windshield. The sound was like a gunshot. The safety glass shattered into 1,000 diamonds, spraying across the hood. Gavin screamed as if he had been hit himself. That car was his pride, his joy, his identity. It was also leased and uninsured for vandalism. Kruger walked around the car methodically. He smashed the side windows. He dented the panels. He took the tire iron to the headlights. He destroyed $50,000 of German engineering in less than 60 seconds, while Gavin watched helpless and terrified. When the car was a ruin, Kruger finally turned his attention to the people. "Where is the money, Gavin?" he asked. His voice was surprisingly soft, which made it terrifying. "Tony is very unhappy. You said you sold the house. You said you had the cash." "I do not have it yet," Gavin stammered, backing away until he hit the fence. The buyer backed out. There were complications. "Just give me one more week." Kruger shook his head slowly. "No more weeks. Tony said if you do not have the money, I should take it out of your hide." He took a step forward. Gavin scrambled backward, tripping over his own feet and falling into the mud. He scrambled on all fours like a crab, desperate to get away. Stan stepped in front of his son. It was the only brave thing I ever saw the man do. But it was also stupid. Stan puffed out his chest, trying to look imposing. "You leave my son alone," Stan shouted. "You are trespassing. I will call the police." Kruger looked at Stan like he was a minor annoyance, a fly to be swatted. He reached out with one hand and grabbed Stan by the throat. He lifted him. Stan was a big man, but Kruger handled him like a bag of dry leaves. He slammed Stan against the side of the ruined BMW. Stan gasped, clawing at the hand, crushing his windpipe. "Sit down, old man," Kruger said, dropping him into the mud. "Or you are next." Stan collapsed, wheezing, clutching his throat. The fight went out of him instantly. Kruger turned back to Gavin, but Gavin was gone. In the chaos of Stan's intervention, Gavin had vanished. Kruger looked around the yard. His eyes scanned the bushes, the trees, the corners of the house. "Where is he?" Kruger asked Brenda. Brenda was standing by the porch railing, shaking so hard her teeth were chattering. She looked at her husband groaning in the mud. She looked at the monster with the tire iron. She looked at the spot where her son had been standing. A mother is supposed to protect her child. A mother is supposed to sacrifice herself. But Brenda was not a mother. She was a survivor, and she saw a predator who wanted blood. "He is in there," she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger toward the side of the garage. He crawled in there. She was pointing at the doghouse. It was a large custom-built structure I had made for a German shepherd I used to have. It was insulated and sturdy, but it was still a doghouse. Kruger walked over to the small wooden structure. He leaned down and looked inside. "Come out, Gavin," he said. There was no movement. Kruger sighed. He raised the tire iron and smashed the roof of the doghouse. Wood splinters flew. I said, "Come out." Gavin crawled out on his belly, covered in dirt and straw. He was crying. He was sobbing like a child. He curled into a ball at Kruger's feet, covering his head with his hands. "Please," he begged, "please do not hurt me. I will get the money. My dad has a pension. My mom has jewelry. Just take them." He was offering up his parents to save himself. I watched from the hospital bed, feeling a mixture of disgust and vindication. This was the man my daughter had married, a coward who would sell his own blood to save his skin. Kruger grabbed Gavin by the back of his shirt and hauled him to his feet. He dragged him toward the truck, presumably to take him somewhere quiet where screams would not matter. But as he dragged him past the main gate, Kruger stopped. He stopped dead in his tracks. He dropped Gavin, who fell back into the mud. Kruger was staring at the bronze plaque mounted on the stone pillar of the gate. It was a simple plaque, tarnished by weather, but the letters were still clear. The Freeman Estate, Estern, 1990. Kruger narrowed his eyes. He looked at the plaque, then he looked at the house. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, but he did not make a call. He opened a photo gallery. He scrolled for a moment, then held the phone up, comparing something on the screen to the name on the gate. He turned to Gavin, who was shivering in the dirt. "Freeman," he asked. "Who is Freeman?" "That is my father-in-law," Gavin whimpered. "Thaddeus Freeman. He is a nobody. He is just an old construction worker." Kruger's face changed. The mask of violence slipped, revealing something else. Recognition. Maybe even fear. "Thaddeus Freeman," Kruger repeated slowly. "Sergeant Major Thaddeus Freeman. The engineer." Gavin looked confused. "I do not know about any Sergeant Major. He just builds houses." Kruger looked at the house again with new eyes. He looked at the structural precision of the roofline. He looked at the way the land was graded. "My father served at the Corps, Kruger," said his voice quiet. "First Engineer Battalion." He told me stories about a Sergeant Freeman. A man who built a bridge under mortar fire in the valley so his men could retreat. A man who carried my father 3 miles when his leg was blown off. He looked down at Gavin with pure contempt. "You are stealing from him," Kruger asked. "You are trying to rip off the man who saved my father's life." Gavin stammered. It is a family matter." Kruger pulled out his phone again. He dialed a number. He put it to his ear. "Pop," he said into the phone. "Yeah, it is me. I am on a job. The name on the gate is Freeman. Thaddeus Freeman." Yeah, I am sure." He listened for a long time. His posture straightened. He nodded. "Yes, sir. I understand. No, sir, I will not touch him. I will fix it." He hung up the phone. He looked at Gavin. He looked at Stan and Brenda. "You made a mistake," he said. "A big mistake." He walked over to Gavin. He did not hit him with the tire iron. He reached out and grabbed Gavin's hand. He squeezed. I heard the bones crunch over the audio feed. Gavin screamed a high, thin sound. "That is for wasting my time," Kruger said. "And that is for disrespecting a hero." He leaned in close to Gavin's face. "If you ever come near this property again, if you ever touch a hair on that man's head, I will not need a tire iron. I will bury you under the foundation. Do you understand?" Gavin nodded, sobbing, clutching his broken hand. Kruger turned and walked back to his truck. He paused at the gate. He took a rag from his pocket and wiped a smudge of dirt off the bronze nameplate. He saluted the empty house. Then he got in his truck and drove away, leaving them broken, bleeding, and terrified. I lay back in my hospital bed. I closed my eyes. I remembered that bridge. I remembered the fire. I remembered carrying a young private named Kruger on my back while the world exploded around us. Karma, I whispered, is a very patient engineer. But the final inspection was yet to come, and I was about to make my grand entrance. The gravel of my driveway crunched under the weight of tires that cost more than Stan's entire wardrobe. It was not a taxi. It was not an ambulance. It was a convoy of 3 black Lincoln Navigators with tinted windows and government plates. They moved with the slow, heavy grace of a funeral procession or a presidential motorcade. I sat in the back of the lead vehicle, adjusting my silk tie in the reflection of the window. The cheap overalls and taped glasses were gone. I was wearing a bespoke charcoal 3-piece suit cut from Italian wool. On my wrist sat a vintage Patek Philippe watch. My posture was straight, my eyes were clear, and my hands were steady. The senile old man had died in the hospital. Thaddeus Freeman, the CEO, had returned to inspect his site. The convoy stopped right in front of the ruined gate. The driver, a man named James, who had been my security detail for 20 years, stepped out and opened my door. I stepped onto the mud of my own driveway. My polished Oxford shoes sank slightly, but I did not care. I stood tall. Behind me, Sheriff Miller stepped out of the second car, his hand resting casually on his belt. Out of the third car came Saul Rothstein, my lawyer and oldest friend, carrying a leather briefcase that contained enough legal firepower to level a city block. We formed a phalanx, a wall of authority. Stan and Brenda were huddled by the garage, shivering and covered in filth. They looked up with eyes wide and hollow. They did not recognize me at first. They were looking for a confused gardener, not a titan of industry. But Gavin knew. He was on his knees, clutching his broken hand where Kruger had squeezed it, but when he saw me, his jaw dropped. He looked from me to the sheriff to the expensive cars. The cognitive dissonance was almost visible. He could not reconcile the victim he thought he had buried with the king standing before him. Kruger was leaning against the hood of his truck, cleaning his fingernails with a knife. He looked up when I approached. He straightened immediately. The menace dropped from his shoulders, replaced by the rigid posture of a soldier. He snapped his heels together. He did not salute because he was a civilian now, but the respect was palpable. Sergeant Major Kruger said, nodding his head. Corporal, I replied, my voice deep and resonant. Your father was a good man. He dug the best trenches in the battalion. He says you carried him out, Sir, Kruger said. He says he owes you his leg and his life. I did what any Marine would do, I said. You tell him Thaddeus says Semper Fi. Kruger smiled. It was a terrifying expression on his scarred face, but it was genuine. Consider the debt paid, Sir, Kruger said. I delivered the message. These civilians were trespassing. I just helped them find the exit. He turned to Gavin, who was cowering in the dirt. Kruger walked over to him one last time. Gavin flinched, trying to crawl away, but he was backed against the fence. Kruger did not use the tire iron. He simply made a fist. It was a slow, deliberate movement. One for the road, Kruger said. He punched Gavin square in the nose. There was a wet crunch. Gavin fell back screaming, clutching his face, blood pouring through his fingers. It was a brutal, efficient punctuation mark to the morning's violence. Kruger nodded to me, climbed into his truck, and roared away. The sound of his engine faded, leaving only the whimpering of my son-in-law. Gavin rolled over, spitting blood. He looked at me with eyes full of madness. He scrambled to his feet, swaying unsteadily. He reached into his pocket with his good hand and pulled out a crumpled, blood-stained piece of paper. It was the deed. The paper I had signed under duress. Get off my land, he screamed, his voice nasal and broken. You cannot be here. This is my house. I have the paper. I have the signature. He waved the document in the air like a holy relic. Officer, arrest this man, Gavin shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. He is trespassing. He is faking his identity. He signed the deed. It is notarized. It is legal. This house belongs to me. Sheriff Miller looked at Gavin with the weary expression of a man who deals with drunks on Saturday nights. He did not reach for his cuffs. He just looked at Rothstein. Saul Rothstein stepped forward. He was a small man in a rumpled suit, but he had a mind like a steel trap. He adjusted his glasses and looked at the paper in Gavin's hand with mild amusement. Mr. Black Rothstein said, his voice dry as dust. I believe you are laboring under a significant misapprehension regarding property law. It is his signature, Gavin yelled, thrusting the paper at Rothstein. Look at it. Thaddeus Freeman. He signed it. He gave it to me. Rothstein did not take the paper. He simply opened his briefcase and pulled out a blue folder. That may indeed be his signature, Rothstein said, although the handwriting suggests considerable duress, which we will address later. However, the signature is irrelevant. Irrelevant, Gavin sputtered. It is a deed transfer. It is a transfer of a personal asset, Rothstein corrected. But Mr. Black, you failed to conduct a basic title search. If you had, you would have discovered a very important detail. Rothstein pulled a document from the folder and held it up. This house, Rothstein announced, does not belong to Thaddeus Freeman the individual. It has not belonged to him for 10 years. The title of this property, along with the surrounding 50 acres, is held by the Freeman Family Trust, a corporate entity registered in Delaware. Gavin stopped breathing. The blood drained from his face, leaving the red of his nose stark and bright. What Gavin whispered. Mr. Freeman is merely the trustee, Rothstein explained, speaking slowly as if to a child. He has usage rights, but he does not have the authority to transfer the asset through a personal deed of gift. To transfer this property requires a board resolution and the signatures of 3 corporate officers. Your document, Mr. Black, is legally worthless. It is a piece of paper with ink on it. It conveys nothing. It transfers nothing. You just assaulted a man and committed fraud to steal a house that he could not have given you even if he wanted to. Gavin looked at the paper in his hand. He looked at the 3 loops in the signature. He looked at the house. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He had committed felonies. He had hired forgers. He had threatened murder, and it was all for nothing. He had stolen a car without an engine. You tricked me, Gavin whispered, dropping the paper into the mud. You knew the whole time. I stepped forward. I walked right up to him until the toes of my Oxfords touched his ruined shoes. I looked down at him. I did not trick you, Gavin, I said, my voice cold. You tricked yourself. You saw an old man and you assumed he was weak. You saw a black man in the woods and you assumed he was poor. You were so blinded by your greed and your racism that you never bothered to check who I actually was. I leaned in close. I am not a retired tinkerer, Gavin. I am the man who built the courthouse you are going to be sentenced in. I am the man who built the prison you are going to rot in. You did not steal my house. You just broke into a bank vault and locked yourself inside. Gavin fell to his knees. He started to cry. It was a pathetic sound. But I have the paper, he sobbed, rocking back and forth. I have the paper. Sheriff Miller stepped forward, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. The metal clicked. You have the right to remain silent, Gavin, the sheriff said. But Gavin was not done. He looked up at me one last time, his eyes filled with a desperate, cornered light. You cannot prove anything else, he hissed. The gun is gone. You have no witnesses to the assault. It is your word against mine. I will say you attacked me. I will say you are crazy. I smiled. It was the smile of the wolf he had been so afraid of. I do not need my word. Gavin, I said. I pulled a remote control from my pocket. I pointed it at the side of the house. I have something better. I have the premiere. You have nothing. Gavin spat, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and bravado. He struggled against the handcuffs, the metal clicking against his wrists. You are just a senile old man making up stories. You have no gun. You have no witnesses. It is my word against yours, and I am a respected businessman. You are a patient who just escaped from a mental facility. He looked at Sheriff Miller with pleading eyes. Officer, this man is dangerous. Gavin lied, his voice pitching into a whine. He attacked me last night. He hit his head and got confused. I tried to help him. I tried to get him medical attention. Now he is inventing these crazy conspiracy theories. There was no gun. There was no assault. Ask my parents. They were there. They saw everything. Stan nodded vigorously, rubbing his bruised throat. It is true, Sheriff Stan croaked. The boy is telling the truth, Thaddeus snapped. He started screaming about wolves and attacked Gavin. We were just trying to restrain him. He is sick in the head. Brenda chimed in, her voice shrill and shaky. He needs help, officer. He belongs in a home. Look at him. He is delusional. They were good liars. They had practiced this narrative. They were betting everything on the fact that the physical evidence was gone and that the word of 3 people would outweigh the word of 1. I watched them spin their web. I listened to them rewrite reality. I felt a calm satisfaction settle over me. They were digging their hole deeper and deeper with every lie. Are you done? I asked, my voice cutting through their babble. Gavin sneered. Done with what, old man? Listening to your fairy tales? I lifted the remote control in my hand. It was a small black device with a single red button. You are right, Gavin, I said. Words are wind. Memories are unreliable. But digital data is forever. I pointed the remote at the side of the house. The entire north wall of the cottage was painted a crisp, matte white. It was an architectural choice I had made for aesthetic reasons, but it also served a secondary function. I pressed the button. A hidden panel in the eaves of the roof slid open. A high-lumen 4K laser projector descended on a motorized mount. At the same time, outdoor speakers hidden in the landscaping hummed to life. "What is that?" Brenda whispered, looking up. "It is showtime," I said. A beam of light cut through the morning air, hitting the white wall of the house. The image was massive, 20 feet wide and crystal clear. It was brighter than a movie theater screen. The video began to play. It was the kitchen. The timestamp in the corner read 9:42 p.m. the previous night. The resolution was so sharp you could see the sweat beading on Gavin's forehead. You could see the madness in his eyes. And you could see the gun. The audio boomed across the yard in Dolby surround sound echoing off the trees. "Sign the paper," Thaddeus the Gavin on the screen hissed. "Sign it, or I swear to God I will paint this kitchen with your brains." The real Gavin let out a strangled sound. He stared at the giant projection of himself holding a gun to my head. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. "That is deep fake," he screamed, struggling against the sheriff's grip. "That is CGI. He made it on a computer. Shut up, Gavin." The sheriff set his eyes glued to the wall. The video continued. It showed me signing the paper. It showed Gavin shoving me. It showed my head cracking against the granite island. The sound of the impact was sickeningly loud, amplified by the speakers. Then came the aftermath. The video cut to a new angle. This one was from the camera hidden in the smoke detector. It showed me lying on the floor bleeding. It showed Stan and Gavin standing over me. "We tell the paramedics he had an episode," Stan's voice boomed over the yard. "We get him admitted to a facility. We dump him there." Stan turned pale. He looked at the screen. Then he looked at me. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The video cut again. Now it was Brenda. She was standing in the living room holding my grandfather clock. "I listed them on Facebook Marketplace," Brenda's voice chirped. "I have buyers coming in an hour." Then it showed her taking the money from Big Mike. It showed her transferring the funds on her phone. The video montage ended with a freeze frame of Gavin's face, twisted in hate, holding the gun. The yard fell silent. The only sound was the wind in the trees and the heavy breathing of the three criminals standing in the mud. I lowered the remote. "That is not CGI, Gavin," I said. "That is 4K evidence stored on a redundant cloud server and emailed to the district attorney 10 minutes ago." Sheriff Miller looked at me, then he looked at the trio. His face was hard. "Well, I think that settles the he said, she said debate," the sheriff drawled. He pulled out his radio. "Dispatch, I need backup at the Freeman residence. 3 in custody. We have felony assault, attempted murder, elder abuse, and grand larceny. Send the transport van." Gavin collapsed. His legs just gave out. He hung from the handcuffs like a puppet with cut strings. He started to scream. It was not a scream of fear. It was a scream of rage. "You ruined my life," he howled, staring at me. "You planned this. You set me up." "I did not set you up, Gavin," I said. "I just gave you enough rope. You tied the noose yourself." Stan suddenly lunged toward Gavin. He tried to hit his son with his cuffed hands. "It was his idea," Stan shouted at the sheriff. "He made me do it. I told him not to. I told him we should just ask for money. He is the one with the gambling debts. He is the one who owes the sharks. I am just an old man. I was scared of him." "You liar," Gavin shrieked, kicking at his father. "You told me to dump him in the home. You told me to dig for the gold." They were tearing each other apart. The family unit had dissolved into a pit of vipers biting each other to survive. Brenda watched them for a second, her eyes darting back and forth. She realized she was going down with the ship. Her survival instinct kicked in. She put a hand to her forehead. She let out a soft moan. "Oh, my heart," she whispered. "I think I am having a heart attack." She collapsed into the mud. It was a terrible performance. She fell too slowly, making sure she did not hit her head. She lay there fluttering her eyelids, waiting for someone to rush to her aid. Nobody moved. "Get up," Brenda the sheriff said tiredly. "The ambulance is for sick people. You are going in the paddy wagon." Brenda opened one eye. She saw that no one was buying it. She sat up, wiping mud off her face, scowling. "Fine," she spat. "But I want a lawyer, and I want my pills." "You will get a public defender," the sheriff said, "and jail aspirin." The backup cruisers arrived, their lights flashing. Deputies swarmed the yard. They took statements. They collected the shattered remains of the BMW. They loaded Gavin, Stan, and Brenda into the back of the transport van. As they were being led away, Gavin stopped. He looked back at the house. He looked at the white wall where his crimes had been projected for the world to see. He looked at me standing on the porch in my suit, untouched and victorious. Why, he asked, his voice broken. Why did you do it this way? You could have just said no. You could have just kicked us out. I walked down the steps until I was standing right in front of him. Because you threatened my daughter, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Because you used my grandson as a bargaining chip. Because you thought you could bully a man who built his life with his own 2 hands. I leaned in close. You wanted to move into my house, Gavin. Now you are moving into the state's house. I hear the accommodations are very secure. The deputy shoved him into the van. The doors slammed shut. I watched them drive away. The silence returned to the woods. It was a different kind of silence now. It was not just peaceful. It was clean. The parasites were gone. The infection was treated. Rothstein walked up beside me. He closed his briefcase. That was theatrical, Thaddeus, he said, a small smile playing on his lips. Even for you. I looked at the projector retracting back into the roof. I always did like a big reveal, Saul, I said. Now about that paperwork. Rothstein nodded. The paperwork is ready. And I believe you have a meeting with your daughter. I turned to look at the black town car waiting by the gate. Keisha was sitting in the back seat watching. She had seen everything. She had seen her husband fall. It was time to rebuild. And this time the foundation would be solid. The visiting room of the county jail smelled of industrial cleaner and stale sweat. It was a scent that stripped a man of his dignity the moment he walked through the heavy steel doors. I sat on a bolted metal stool wearing a navy blue suit that cost more than the legal defense fund Gavin was trying to scrape together. I checked my watch. It was a Patek Philippe, a piece of engineering perfection that marked time with silent precision. Gavin was late. In prison, time is the only thing you have plenty of, but the guards like to make inmates wait just to remind them who held the keys. Finally, the door on the far side of the glass partition buzzed open. Gavin shuffled in. He was wearing a bright orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. His nose was heavily bandaged where Kruger had broken it, and his left eye was swollen shut. He looked like a man who had fallen into a meat grinder. He sat down opposite me. He did not pick up the phone immediately. He just looked at me with his one good eye. There was no anger left in him, only a deep, hollow fear. He picked up the receiver. His hand was shaking. "What are you doing here, Thaddeus?" he rasped. His voice sounded wet and broken. "Did you come to gloat? Did you come to tell me Keisha filed for divorce? I already know. Her lawyer was here this morning." I looked at him through the scratched plexiglass. I did not feel joy. I did not feel pity. I felt the cold satisfaction of a structural engineer who has identified a fault and removed it before the building collapsed. I did not come to talk about the divorce, Gavin. I said, my voice calm and steady. I came to give you something. Or rather, to show you what you threw away. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a thick blue folder. I held it up against the glass so he could see the label. "Documents," he whispered. "More evidence. You already destroyed me. What more do you want?" "It is not evidence," I said. I opened the folder and pressed the first page against the glass. It was a real estate contract, a purchase agreement. It was dated 3 months ago. Read the address Gavin I ordered. He squinted. 1000 Main Street, Penthouse 4B, that is the Meridian Tower. It was. The Meridian was the most exclusive residential building in the city. It had a doorman, a rooftop pool, and a view of the river that people killed for. Read the beneficiary line, I said. Gavin's eye widened. He leaned closer, his breath fogging the glass. Gavin and Keisha Black. He looked up at me, confusion warring with the misery on his face. "I do not understand," he said. "I bought this apartment 3 months ago, Gavin," I said. "I paid cash. $1.2 million. I knew you were struggling. I knew you lost your job. I knew about the debts even before I hacked your computer. I am a father, Gavin. I wanted my daughter to be secure. I wanted my grandson to have a home. And despite everything, despite the fact that I never liked you, I wanted to give you a chance to be a man." I turned the page to show the transfer deed. It was fully prepared, waiting only for my signature to finalize the gift. This was the surprise, I said. This was why I invited you to the lake house. I was going to give you the keys this weekend. I was going to clear your debts and give you a fresh start in a luxury apartment. All you had to do was come to my house eat my food, and treat me with a basic level of human respect for 2 days. Gavin started to shake. Tears welled up in his good eye and spilled over the bandage. You were going to give us a penthouse, he choked out. $1 million apartment, for free. Yes, I said. But you were too greedy, Gavin. You were too impatient. You saw an old black man in the woods, and you thought you could take what you wanted instead of waiting for what was being offered. You thought I was a mark. You thought I was prey. I pulled the document back from the glass. I placed it on the metal table on my side. If you had just been decent, I continued, if you had just been kind, you would be sleeping on Egyptian cotton sheets overlooking the city tonight. You would be debt-free. You would have your wife and your son. Gavin slammed his fist against the glass. It was a weak, pathetic thud. Give it to me, he begged. Please, Thaddeus. I am sorry. I will do anything. I can change. If I have the apartment, I can sell it. I can pay for a lawyer. I can fix this. Please do not leave me here. I looked at him. I looked at the desperation that was still fueled by selfishness. He did not want the apartment to live in with his family. He wanted it to sell. He wanted it to save his own skin. He had learned nothing. I stood up. I picked up the heavy document. It is too late for that. Gavin, I said. I took the deed in both hands. The paper was thick, high-quality bond. It resisted for a second before it gave way. Rip! The sound was loud in the small room. Gavin screamed, No, 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 do not do that. I tore it again, and again. I shredded the $1 million gift into strips of meaningless confetti. I let the pieces fall onto the floor of the visiting room. You had a choice, Gavin, I said, looking down at him. You could have had the penthouse. You could have had the life. But you chose the doghouse. You chose the mud. I buttoned my jacket. I already called my broker this morning, I said. I am selling the penthouse. The proceeds are going into an irrevocable trust for Leo's education. He will get the money when he is 25. You will never see a dime of it. Gavin was sobbing now, his head resting against the dirty metal shelf under the window. He was broken. He was finished. Goodbye, Gavin, I said. I turned and walked toward the door. I did not look back. I could hear him screaming my name, pounding on the glass, but the sound was muffled by the heavy steel door closing behind me. I walked out of the jail and into the bright sunlight. The air tasted sweet. My driver opened the door of the town car. I slid into the leather seat. Where to, Mr. Freeman, he asked. Home, James, I said. To the lake. I had a porch to fix. I had a garden to replant. And for the first time in a long time, I had absolute silence. The kind of silence money cannot buy. The kind of silence you have to earn. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and old wood, a scent that usually brought me peace, but today it smelled like reckoning. I sat in the front row wearing my charcoal suit, my hands resting on the head of my cane. Beside me, Keisha sat straight and tall, no longer the weeping girl I had rescued from the apartment, but a woman who had found her spine. We watched as Gavin stood before the judge. He looked small in his orange jumpsuit, his swagger gone, his expensive haircut grown out and shaggy. The federal prosecutor had been thorough. The evidence from my hard drive hack, combined with the video of the assault and the testimony from the forger Paul Hayes, had painted a picture of a career criminal, not a desperate husband. The judge adjusted his glasses and looked down at Gavin with zero sympathy. Mr. Black, you have engaged in a pattern of deceit, fraud, and violence that shocks the conscience, the judge intoned. You preyed on the elderly, you stole from your employers, and you attempted to murder the man who gave you shelter. For the charges of money laundering, wire fraud, attempted murder, and elder abuse, I sentence you to 15 years in a federal penitentiary without the possibility of parole for the first 12 years. Gavin did not scream this time. He just slumped forward, his head hitting the defense table with a hollow thud. He was done. The shark had been definned. Stan and Brenda were next. They stood trembling, their faces gray and haggard. They had pleaded down to lesser charges to avoid jail time, but the judge was not feeling lenient. You two are parasites, the judge said. You aided and abetted a violent criminal, and you stole from a man who offered you hospitality. I am sentencing you to 5 years of strict probation. Furthermore, you are ordered to pay restitution for the stolen property. Since you have no assets in this state and no ties to this community, you are hereby ordered to return to your state of origin immediately. If you set foot in this county again, you will be arrested on sight. They were banished. They were being sent back to wherever they came from, broke, humiliated, and with a criminal record that would follow them for the rest of their miserable lives. As the bailiffs led them away, Brenda looked back at me. Her eyes were filled with hate, but also with fear. She saw me sitting there untouchable, and she finally understood that she had tried to rob a fortress with a plastic spoon. I did not smile. I did not wave. I just watched them disappear through the side door into oblivion. Spring came to the lake with a burst of green that covered the scars of the winter. The mud dried up, the grass grew back thick and lush, and the birds returned to the trees. I spent the first few weeks of the season doing what I do best. I rebuilt. I hired a crew, but I did the finish work myself. I replaced the smashed oak floorboards in the living room, weaving the new wood in with the old so seamlessly you could not tell where the damage had been. I repaired the drywall, I repainted the kitchen, and I installed a new security system that was even more advanced than the last one. But the best addition to the property was not the repairs. It was the guests. I renovated the guest house down by the water. It used to be a storage shed, but I framed it out, insulated it, and turned it into a cozy two-bedroom cottage. Keisha moved in a week after the trial. She found a job as an interior designer using the eye for detail she inherited from her mother. She was happy. She was safe. And every morning I woke up to the sound of my grandson Leo laughing in the yard. One afternoon I took Leo down to the dock. The water was glass smooth, reflecting the blue sky. I handed him a small fishing pole I had bought for him. "Now listen, Leo," I said, kneeling down next to him. "Fishing is like building. You cannot rush it. You have to check your line, you have to set your hook, and you have to be patient." He looked at me with big, serious eyes. "Like this, Granddad?" he asked, holding the rod tight. "Just like that," I said. We sat there for an hour. Most 4-year-olds would have gotten bored, but Leo had the Freeman focus. When the bobber finally dipped, he did not jerk it. He waited just like I told him. Then he reeled it in, steady and calm. It was a small bass, shining silver in the sun. "I got one," he shouted, his face splitting into a grin that looked so much like my wife Rose it made my chest ache. "You sure did, son," I said, helping him unhook it. "You caught it yourself. Nobody gave it to you. You earned it." He threw the fish back, and we watched it swim away. "Can we catch a bigger one tomorrow?" he asked. "We can catch whatever we want," I said. "We have all the time in the world." That evening the sun set in a blaze of orange and purple, casting long shadows across my deck. I sat in my Italian leather armchair, which I had moved out onto the porch for the evening air. I had a glass of vintage Cabernet in my hand, the kind Brenda would have chugged without tasting. I took a sip, letting the rich oak flavor settle on my tongue. The house was quiet, but it was a good quiet. It was not the silence of loneliness. It was the silence of peace. Keisha and Leo were asleep in the guest house. The woods were still. The war was over. I looked out at the lake, feeling the cool breeze on my face. I was 71 years old. I had fought a war in the jungle, I had built a business from nothing, and I had defended my family from wolves in human skin. I was tired, but I was content. Then my phone buzzed on the side table. I picked it up. It was Big Mike. "Hey, boss." Mike's voice rumbled through the speaker. "Sorry to bother you this late, but I just got a call from the city. They are looking for a project lead for the new suspension bridge downtown. It is a nightmare contract, boss. The soil is unstable, the timeline is impossible, and the budget is tight. Nobody else wants to touch it. They asked if the legend was really retired." I swirled the wine in my glass. I looked at the house I had built. I looked at the guest house where my legacy was sleeping. I thought about sitting on this porch for the rest of my life watching the water. It sounded nice. But then I felt that familiar itch in my hands. The itch to build. The itch to solve problems that broke lesser men. "Tell them I am interested." "Mike," I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. "But tell them my fee just went up." Mike laughed loud and deep. "I knew you would say that, boss. I will tell them you are in." I hung up the phone. I took another sip of wine. The night air was getting cold, but I did not need a jacket. I felt warm. I felt strong. Gavin thought I was an old dog ready to be put down. He thought I had no fight left. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass of the sliding door. The suit fit perfectly. The eyes were sharp. "The old wolf still has teeth," I whispered to the night, and tomorrow I was going hunting again. I learned that silence is often the loudest warning. Gavin and his parents mistook my quiet retirement for weakness. They thought that because I was old and lived in the woods, I was prey. But they forgot that the forest is where the wolves live. True power does not need to announce itself with flashy cars or loud demands. It sits quietly in the corner observing and waiting for the right moment to strike. Family is not defined by blood but by respect and loyalty. If you break that trust, do not be surprised when the foundation collapses. Always inspect the ground before you try to bury someone. You might just be digging your own grave. If you enjoyed seeing justice served ice cold, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of retribution. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever had to teach a toxic family member a lesson they never forgot?